In Marvel, I am Homelander. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction. So don't try any techniques you hear here in real life, your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want VIP access to exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting with things you won't find anywhere else. Chapter 51 Support and Trial. What do you mean I bravely defended the White House? Did I just fall asleep and end up in some parallel universe where I'm the good guy? John stared blankly at the reporter's explanation. On television, the female reporter spoke with great emotion. Last night, a group of thugs stormed the White House, using weapons of mass destruction, resulting in 17 deaths and 21 injuries. The Secretary of State was among the dead. Furthermore, according to the investigation, before attacking the White House, these thugs also destroyed the Statue of Liberty as a demonstration. Here is the scene. As she spoke, the television showed photos of the scene at the White House. The previously collapsed Statue of Liberty was gone, leaving only a dilapidated presidential building and an environment that looked like it had been swept by a tornado. I typed this, didn't I? John was starting to feel insecure about the television. He pressed the remote control to change the channel, but after switching several times, all the content on the screen was unbearable. Homelander bravely fights the evil, stands up to protect the citizens of New York. The president says we should learn from Homelander's spirit and inspirational life, a life of hard work. Homelander is admirable. What the hell? Is this what the Ancient One meant by enjoy life? Last night, John looked at the headlines praising him like a living sage, a great man, and found it all absurd. Just as John was lost in thought, his doorbell rang. Puzzled, he picked up his uniform, waited for it to automatically put on, and went downstairs to open the door. As soon as he opened the door, the crowd outside erupted in cheers. A man in his 50s stood at the door, smiling and waving at him, saying, "Homelander, good morning. How did you sleep last night?" John looked at the man and immediately recognized him. Wasn't this the vice president from the White House last night? John extended his hand and shook hands with the other person. After withdrawing his hand, he asked, "What are you guys doing? Are these people outside your hired shills? These people genuinely support you, but fans don't necessarily need to know their idols completely, right? There are cameras outside broadcasting the whole thing live. Just relax and enjoy yourself." Rodriguez winked at John, then gently waved his hand, and someone handed him a microphone. Rodriguez took the microphone and called out to the crowd, "Please calm down, everyone. I have an important announcement to make." Soon, the noisy crowd gradually quieted down. Then, Rodriguez smiled and announced, in recognition of Homelander's significant contribution to protecting New York yesterday, and his evident dedication over the past few months, after a unanimous vote by the President and Congress, it has been decided to award Homelander the Medal of Honor in recognition of his outstanding achievements. As he spoke, he took a medal from a box beside him, showed it to the crowd, and then looked at John. Seeing that John didn't respond, Rodriguez nervously handed the medal to him, silently praying that John would accept it cooperatively. Looking at the box being offered, John, with a playful attitude, accepted it. However, instead of wearing it around his neck like previous recipients of the Medal of Honor, he removed the sash and pinned the medal directly to his chest, then smiled and waved to the crowd outside. As he put on the medal, the previously calm atmosphere instantly erupted into a roar, a huge cheer that engulfed the entire street. Seeing that John was willing to accept the medal, Rodriguez secretly breathed a sigh of relief. At least Homelander was willing to cooperate, and the biggest hurdle was over. "So, Mr. John, may I have a personal tour of your house? I'm quite curious about the homes of superheroes," Rodriguez asked with a smile. Wanting to figure out what the other man was up to, John didn't refuse, but stepped aside to let him in. After the vice president entered the room, John closed the door and asked directly, "Tell me, what exactly did you do after you left last night? We just didn't want outsiders to misunderstand you. All negative news about you in the United States was forbidden from being published," Rodriguez said humbly. "HMPH, you guys certainly have a lot of ulterior motives." Hearing the praise outside the door, John, who had been prepared to face enemies from all sides, was now in a good mood. General Ross's verdict will be held at 2 p.m. Please be on time, Rodriguez said with a smile. I also have a small personal favor to share, but it's not ready yet, so please look forward to it. A favor? What else have you prepared? John asked, his hands behind his back. Please allow me to keep you in suspense for a moment. Everything will be ready after General Ross's execution at noon, Rodriguez said confidently. I guarantee with my life that you will be completely satisfied. A life guarantee, quite bold. John stared at the other man and said bluntly, Speak, what do you want from me? I've already received sufficient compensation from Congress for serving you, I don't need anything more from you. Seeing the vice president's pragmatic attitude, John didn't feel like losing his temper and was already anticipating the so-called gift. Meanwhile, in an elegantly decorated villa in New York, an elderly man with a white beard was groaning in pain on his bed, his body covered in bandages. Damn it, that masked guy yesterday, he came in without saying a word and broke at least 8 ribs. I swear I'll never find out who he is, Ross thought viciously. But before he could utter any more threats, the villa door was kicked open, and a group of people rushed in, ignoring the servants' attempts to stop them, and began sorting and collecting the villa's decorations. What are you doing? Do you know who I am? This is my private villa. Ross's already bad mood worsened, and he glared at them. But soon, a man approached him, showing identification and relevant documents, saying, Thaddeus E. Ross, you have violated multiple U.S. laws, including but not limited to endangering national security, illegal human experimentation, unauthorized use of weapons of mass destruction, accepting bribes, and raping an innocent wild boar. You are now formally arrested. Are you crazy? I want to see the president. Who gave you the right to arrest me? Ross exclaimed incredulously, his violent movement immediately aggravating his injuries, causing him to gasp. I'm sorry, but the documents were witnessed by the president and signed by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Based on the crimes you have committed, if proven true, all your illegally obtained assets will be confiscated, and you will be executed by firing squad. Ross was dumbfounded. Even if it was a frame-up, it wouldn't be this blatant. What kind of trial would arrest a general so directly? But before he could protest, his mouth was gagged, and he was taken away without any ability to resist. Chapter 52, A Small Plan for Future Combat Power. Inside, John and Rodriguez spoke briefly before Rodriguez tactfully left. Before leaving, however, he left a specially made cell phone, saying that if anything happened, John could call them through it. It contained the phone numbers of all the top figures in American politics. This feels pretty good, John thought, a slight smile playing on his lips, listening to the ongoing cheers outside the window. Just then, the cell phone Rodriguez had given him rang. John pulled it out and saw an unfamiliar number not in his contact list. Who? Tony? This isn't his number, John answered casually. A humble, elderly voice came through. Hello, is this Homelander? I'm the current principal of Midtown High School. You can call me Wright. Oh, Principal Wright? What can I do for you? John asked curiously. It's about your studies. The government knows that because of your work fighting crime, you may not have time to focus on your studies. However, given your contributions to the United States, you can directly apply to any university after graduating high school, if you wish. Of course, during your application period, you don't need to worry about attending classes. You can even choose not to come, or selectively attend a few classes. Midtown High School always welcomes you, Principal Wright said respectfully. That's wonderful. I've always hesitated about balancing my studies and career. This has been a great help. John was pleased to hear he didn't have to come to class, then asked, Principal, I have a question. Please go ahead. Do you know Dr. Otto Gunther Octavius and Dr. Hank Pym? John asked. I've always been curious about them and would like to talk to them. I've heard of both of them. If you'd like to meet them, I can arrange a meeting for you, Wright said confidently. Before making this call, the U.S. government had already assured John that all his suggestions would be accepted. Even if he couldn't arrange it himself, he could have the U.S. government arrange a meeting with the 2 doctors. With the government involved, wouldn't it be a piece of cake? Okay, then I'll trouble the principal. John smiled and hung up the phone, his gaze drifting across the rooftop to the sun in the sky. To be honest, he had always been very curious. Superman's ability to become stronger came from the light of the yellow sun, so was there an energy source that could replace the sun's light to power him? After all, scientifically speaking, The sun is nothing more than a product of nuclear fusion. So, what if they directly simulated it, allowing small mass atoms to fuse together under high temperature and pressure, generating new, heavier atomic nuclei, accompanied by a nuclear reaction that releases enormous energy? Apart from the scale not being large enough, wasn't that just a miniature sun? So why was it said that Superman couldn't absorb it? Before this, he had also come into contact with a reactor in Tony Stark's chest, but even holding it in his hand, he couldn't feel any energy absorption. Obviously, Tony Stark's almost fantastical cold fusion technology wasn't suitable for him. So, if he wanted to lower his expectations even further, he wanted to try the unstable artificial sun that Otto had to see if it would help him. If successful, combined with Pym particles, and each of the trillions of cells in his body were stuffed with a sun, then all those golden Superman, mind-controlling Superman, and one-punch five-dimensional Superman would be a thing of the past. After all, the golden Superman only spent 85,000 years inside the sun to reach the fifth dimension. With the efficiency of trillions of suns in his body, he could surpass the golden Superman's 80,000-a-year level in less than a second, and barely gain a foothold in the Marvel Universe. This efficiency of advancement is no less than the self-distorting evil path of the Kempf bracelet, combined with the Deo Heart Demon Seed and the Shattered Dream Blade that has been circulating online for so long. To exaggerate even further, stuffing a sun into every particle would allow him to ascend to heaven with his left foot on his right. At that time, what would be the strongest Superman system? He would be the strongest Superman, so what need would he have for a system? With this thought in mind, John looked through the roof at the gleaming sun in the sky, stretched out his hand and grasped it. Everything was understood without words. Of course, the idea was wonderful, but reality was harsh. All of the above was just John's plan for the future. After all, if Otto's artificial sun couldn't bring him any improvement, he would have to try eating stars directly with Pym particles. However, the difference in physical abilities required to transform his body into a Dyson sphere to eat stars and to eat an artificial sun was too great. The former required at least the ability to extinguish stars with a freezing breath, and who knows how many progress bars would be filled to reach that stage? It would take at least several years to meet the prerequisites. You have to eat one bite at a time, John sighed, then opened the window, smiled and waved to the cheering crowd, and then soared into the sky. Once in the clouds, all was silent. John activated his supervision and super hearing, and quickly rushed in a certain direction. In a detached villa in Manhattan, the heart of New York City, Tony Stark lay on the sofa, frowning as he flipped through the information Jarvis had found for him. Anti-swelling ointment was still applied to the back of his head. After a long while, he sighed deeply, his eyes filled with an undisguised disappointment. Bang! A loud crash rang out, and John, clad in his battlesuit, burst in, standing stiffly in front of Stark, startling him so much he jumped off the sofa. "What are you doing here again?" Recognizing John, Stark scoffed. "Why don't you be your American hero and come looking for a nobody like me, Iron Man? Do you want to kill me like you do with other criminals?" Tony retorted resentfully. "I just wanted to borrow something," John said with a slightly embarrassed smile. "Borrow what? My head?" Tony finally couldn't hide his anger. "Do you know what you did last night? God! After knocking me out, you just dumped me on the ground outside the prison, leaving me to lie there in the cold wind all night. I just got my medical report, mild concussion, a cold, and a stiff neck." Tony pointed at John, his voice filled with indignation. "And you? You stormed the White House, threatened the president, and left me out in the cold wind all alone. And with that, how dare you come asking me for anything again?" Stark grew angrier and more agitated, until finally his finger jabbed John's chest, his body trembling uncontrollably. "Sorry." Looking at Stark, wrapped in a wool coat and sniffling as he spoke, John realized he had indeed gone too far. Chapter 53 Marvel Universe, Stark's Confusion. Apologize? If apologies were enough, you wouldn't have stormed the White House threatening the president and killing the Secretary of State. Tony scoffed, his tone irritating. "Tell me, what's the purpose of your visit?" Stark sat back down on the sofa, casually swallowing his cold medicine, and said coldly, Actually, I wanted to borrow some research data on a small reactor from you." John chuckled dryly and whispered, "Ha, you make it sound so easy. Countless people outside want this technology. What do you want it for?" Tony stared at John with a serious expression. You should have already guessed the source of my abilities. You mean Superman from DC Comics, the one everyone's talking about in New York? To be honest, I haven't read that stuff since I was 10. Getting down to business, Tony's mood gradually returned to normal. I just didn't expect there to actually be a Superman, and not the kind that's not exactly benevolent. But what does that have to do with you asking me to lend you the research data? Stark asked. Have you heard of Otto Gunther Octavius? His current research focuses on controlled nuclear fusion, so I want to show him your micro-reactor technology, John stated his purpose. You mean? Knowing John's Superman identity, Stark had clearly guessed John's intentions and gasped. Aren't you afraid of a situation like All-Star Superman's, where he absorbs too much solar energy and dies? I'll definitely take it step by step, stopping absorption once I reach the limit, consolidating it, and then increasing the power again. John wasn't worried at all. Aren't you satisfied with your current power? Tony stared at John and said, you can already dominate the entire Earth. That's just because you haven't seen what the future holds. John adopted the mysterious aura of the Ancient One and said, what if I told you that in 3 months, Earth might see villains like Doomsday, the Joker, or even Satan? What if I told you that, according to the normal timeline, in a dozen years, half of all life in the universe will die? Do you still think my power can control everything? Doomsday, the universe has lost half of its life. What exactly happened in the future? Tony's expression turned serious. Simply put, under the wise leadership of some purple-skinned individual, some powerful force was used to randomly kill half the population of the universe. John shrugged. Originally, you should have been fine in the future, but the moment you knew the future, everything changed. Perhaps because of Pot's disappearance, your future daughter might also disappear. My daughter? I have a daughter in the future. Hearing this, Tony, no longer caring about the cosmic crisis, asked directly, his eyes shining. Of course, I've seen her. She's a very cute little girl, but sadly, she lost her father at a young age. John said regretfully. Okay, you win, Jarvis. Tony shouted, and a pale blue virtual screen immediately appeared in front of them, containing all the data on the micro-reactor before acquiring the new element. Thanks. John thanked him, then frantically flipped through the screen in front of him. With the support of his super brain, the speed of memorization depended on the speed of scrolling through the virtual screen. Don't bother memorizing it, I'll just send you an electronic copy later. Tony leaned closer and asked, now tell me, what will my future daughter look like? What will her personality be like? Will she be obedient? Anyway, you'll definitely be satisfied. Of course, if things change in the future, I hope you and Potts can still have her. John said, reciting the entire information in a few seconds. What do you mean? You mean my future daughter might disappear? Tony's expression changed, and he hurriedly asked. Very good. The moment you had that thought in your mind, an infinite number of multiverses where you didn't have your daughter were born. John suddenly said. Wait, what do you mean? I don't understand. Tony was completely confused. What did he mean by his daughter from an infinite number of universes disappearing? This is the worldview of our universe. Individual universes are infinitely large and expand endlessly, with infinite dimensions upwards and endless complexity downwards. Every thought you have will create a universe of the same level as your imagination. And any thought within that universe will create another universe of the same level. Simultaneously, within the universe, from humans down to elementary particles, thoughts arise, creating universes. Simply put, universes are nested within universes, infinitely nested within infinitely. Your past, present, and future are simultaneously manifested in countless different universes of immeasurable size, and this is just the most basic worldview of the Marvel Universe. John explained simply. But even this simple explanation almost overwhelmed Tony, taking him a long time to grasp the meaning. You mean, in countless universes, there exist an infinite number of past, present, and future Tony Starks? Tony asked incredulously. Of course, anything is possible in the multiverse. In some universes, I could even kill you without a second thought. Of course, by the time I have this thought, you have already died in countless universes. John said, walking over to the shelf next to him to pour himself a drink. Looking at the shelves full of expensive red wine, he couldn't help but complain, damn it, don't you have anything to drink? This whole shelf is full of wine, and I'm still just a high school student, not even an adult yet. But Tony didn't listen to John's complaints. his mind still preoccupied with the worldview he just discussed. You mean, there are infinitely many universes with infinitely many versions of you and me, so isn't all of this meaningless? After all, even if I die, there are other versions of me living on. What do other universes have to do with you? John opened the refrigerator in the villa, found some fruit, took a bite, and said, "Will you get full if I eat apples?" Okay, when I had this idea, a strange universe where you get full while others eat was indeed born. But why think so much? In this universe, only you can protect your wife, and I'm sure your future daughter won't recognize so many different fathers. John finished the apple in a few bites, and seeing Tony Stark still deep in thought, he said helplessly, "Why are you thinking so much? I'm still here. Once I've become strong enough, maybe I can help you kill all the other infinitely many Tony Starks. Then you'll be the only Stark, and you can have Potts and your daughter from countless universes. Since you say the past and future both exist, how can you be sure it's not some other universe version of you who got there first and killed me?" Tony asked a fatal question. "Then I'd rather die. Ross showed me with reality that you never know whether tomorrow or a missile will come first." John said nonchalantly. "Enjoy life until then." Chapter 54 Dr. Octopus. Inside Tony's villa, Tony remained lost in self-doubt for a long time because of John's words. John sat on the sofa, watching Tony Stark wallow in self-doubt, not worried that he wouldn't recover. He knew Tony just needed a little time to process it. John had planned to stay at the villa until the afternoon before going to check on Ross, that old lamplighter, who had been executed. Just then, Rodriguez's phone rang. He took it out and saw it was the principal's number, which wasn't saved in his contacts. "Hello, is this principal right?" "Yes, Mr. John. Because of your request, the government, after inquiring about Dr. Otto's schedule, is also very interested in you and is willing to dedicate a day to speak with you. You can see Dr. Otto as long as you come to the school today. As for Dr. Pym, it may take a while longer," Wright said apologetically. So fast, John was beginning to feel satisfied with the government's efficiency. Clearly, the fact that they could meet so quickly, and that they even set aside a whole day to talk whenever he arrived, meant the government must have offered considerable benefits, perhaps even a large additional research grant. "Thank you for the principal's help. I'll be right there, it shouldn't take long," John said with a smile as he hung up the phone, greeting Tony. Stark, however, simply waved his hand dismissively, clearly still inside. Stepping out of the villa, John arrived at Midtown High School in 2 seconds, creating a gust of wind. He landed openly at the school gate. Midtown High School had reopened after a brief closure yesterday, but since it was currently class time, there were few students loitering on campus. John's conspicuous attire immediately attracted attention, easily noticed by students near the windows in the school buildings. Soon, hushed discussions began to circulate among the students. After yesterday's events, these students didn't share the same positive view of John as others online. They were still shaken by what had happened. Kent. Inside the classroom, Gwen listened to her classmates' hushed discussion about yesterday's events, her expression growing increasingly complex, her disappointment evident in her eyes, a reflection of her father's warning the previous night. "Look, it's Homelander. He's at school today too. Holy crap, it really is him, still in his battle suit. Is he even coming to study? I'm a little scared about yesterday. Are you crazy? Saying things like that near him? He might hear you." Homelander. Hearing her classmates' conversation, Gwen was startled and turned to look. Through the window, she could see the figure in black battle suit at the school gate. John, after greeting the school security guard, immediately located Otto, but also felt Gwen's gaze. Their eyes met in midair, and John could clearly see the wariness, disappointment, and distance in Gwen's eyes. John nodded subtly to Gwen to indicate he had seen him, then vanished in an instant amidst the gasps of those around him. In the principal's office at Midtown High School, Otto waited somewhat idly for John's arrival. Having just confirmed the amount of government funding, he was in a good mood. Although the research was urgent, exchanging a day's work for such a large sum of money was well worth it. Knock, knock, knock. A knock came at the door. Otto, guessing who it was, went to the door and opened it. Sure enough, Homelander was there, smiling at him. "Dr. Otto Gunther Octavius," John said. Sizing up the slightly overweight, somewhat simple-minded man before him, slowly extending his right hand. Otto smiled and shook John's hand, saying, "It's an honor to meet you, Homelander. I didn't expect you to specifically want to see me. The two entered the office, and John spoke first. I heard your current research project is to create a controllable artificial sun using nuclear fusion. How is the progress? Otto looked at John with some surprise. He hadn't expected this guy to actually be talking about science. He pondered for a moment and said, the research is progressing well. If all goes well, we expect to be able to officially reproduce it in the second half of next year. The second half of next year? That's a bit long. John took out a USB drive and handed it over, saying, here are the specific details of the palladium microreactor that Stark has. Will it be of any use to you? A microreactor. Otto's eyes behind his thick glasses immediately lit up. He almost snatched the USB drive from John's hand and opened his laptop to check it out. Within minutes, he exclaimed excitedly, genius. Stark is practically a genius. I could never have imagined this method of cold fusion of palladium in my entire life. My God, this is practically a revolutionary breakthrough. Mr. Homelander, this is incredibly helpful to my research, Otto said, turning to John. Now I can reproduce it by the end of the year. The end of the year? 6 months? John frowned. If all resources are available, can it be manufactured within 3 months? 3 months? That's too rushed. Otto shook his head immediately. Sir, it's not a matter of resources. I need at least a few weeks to combine Stark's data with my original ideas. And since this is the first time manufacturing it, many parameters haven't been checked. Any mistake could cause the entire experiment to fail. John frowned, not entirely satisfied with the result. Compared to the female octopus doctor from the other universe who could create a particle accelerator that could traverse the multiverse, this guy in front of him, who couldn't even create a nuclear fusion experiment and was subsequently defeated, was indeed far inferior. Knowing that the progress of this person in front of him didn't meet his expectations, John's tone became much colder. He walked step by step to Otto, gently placing his right hand on his shoulder, and said, since you said the end of the year, I'll give you time. If you don't finish before the end of the year, then you'd better be prepared to accept punishment. As John spoke, a red light flashed in his eyes, and Otto's glasses frame immediately broke off. The heavy lens fell to the ground, cracking several times, and Otto's back was soaked with cold sweat. No problem, Mr. Homelander, I promise to complete the goal before the end of the year, Otto agreed tremulously, and John's face returned to a smile. He picked up the lens from the ground and put it in Otto's hand, saying gently, don't worry, focus on your research and try to complete the experiment as soon as possible. If you have any problems, go directly to the government and say it was my instruction. They will help you. Don't let me down. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55 Arrogance at first, respect it later. After giving the future Dr. Octopus a little encouragement, John came out of his office. Someone was already waiting for him at the door. John turned and saw Gwen with her arms crossed, leaning against the wall. I heard everything you said in there. Seeing John come out, Gwen stared at him with a look of someone looking at a stranger. Murder, coercion, what happened to you yesterday? How could you change so much? Shouldn't it be class time now? Did you skip class? John asked. Answer my question. Gwen raised her voice. You've become completely unlike the John Kent I remember. Because I have absolutely no desire to be a superhero. Seeing her insistence on pressing the issue, John's tone gradually turned cold. Meanwhile, Otto, who had just opened his office door, saw John talking to someone at the doorway. Startled, he closed the door again, intending to wait half an hour before coming out. On this land of sin, no matter how many criminals you fight, new criminals will always emerge. Even with countless superheroes, it's useless. John's tone was icy cold. In fact, I didn't initially become a superhero with the intention of doing good, I had another purpose. Do you really think I'd want to waste so much time, abandoning all leisure and entertainment, just to simply enjoy the feeling of doing good? You have no idea how agonizing the past few months have been for me. At first, I thought I'd just endure it a little, spend a year, 10 years, even 100 years, pretending to be a good person everyone praises. Compared to eternal life, these decades of accumulation are insignificant. That was my thought a few days ago. But Ross's 2 missiles made me realize that what accumulation, what bullshit eternal life, if you don't enjoy the present, when your mind flashes before you die, all you'll remember are painful memories. So I'm not pretending anymore. I'm not a good person, I'm laying my cards on the table. John looked down at Gwen condescendingly. Let whoever wants to be a superhero be one. I'll have my fun first. Gwen stared up at John in shock, speechless. Although she had expected it, she still couldn't accept that the John she had spoken to before was all an act. Looking at Gwen, John smiled knowingly. Guess when I've ever really liked the word superhero? When? When you said I turned bad. John laughed heartily. Now I practically rule the whole of America. As a ruler, how could I be against having a group of superheroes fighting crime and consolidating my rule? Your superheroes are awesome. Gwen, slightly defensive, clenched her fist and threw a punch at John's face, but he easily grabbed her wrist. Spider-Man, don't think that just because we've known each other for a long time, I can tolerate you indefinitely. John laughed, pressing Gwen's shoulders against the wall. Gwen felt this moment was so similar to that scene months ago, but her feelings now were vastly different. Our ideologies differ, destined to part ways. John looked at the angry, struggling Gwen and said, You, just be your vigilante in New York and stop interfering with my affairs. As for me, I have the most fans in the entire country, and who knows, I might just start the world's largest Don't Laugh challenge next. John said with a sudden inspiration. Indiscriminate killing, threatening others. Gwen gritted her teeth and said, Do you know you've become a supervillain? How could I be a supervillain? I have the right to interpret the law. Don't you know you just endangered national security by attacking me? John teased, as if he were toying with an angry cat. What nonsense are you talking about? How could there be such a law? Gwen said angrily. It's okay, I'll have someone at the White House write one for you later. John chuckled, All right, I'm not talking to you anymore, I have to go see Ross's inauguration ceremony later. As soon as he finished speaking, Gwen felt her body loosen and slide down the wall. The person who had been in front of her had disappeared. Damn it. She clenched her fist in anger, feeling a huge sense of defeat. The thought of going after Ross yesterday because of John's death suddenly felt ridiculously absurd. Like Gwen, John wasn't as relaxed as he appeared. To say he didn't like Gwen would be self-deception, but their personalities were almost completely different, and John wasn't so infatuated with her that he'd twist himself for her. So, since things were like this, hesitation would only lead to more trouble, and he decided to cut ties completely. Seriously, I don't want to be a good guy, and I'm not even a complete bad guy, John mentally berated himself. If he really went to extremes, he had a million ways to make one submit to him like those people in the White House, but in the end, he didn't choose to do it. That's it, this is so annoying, John scratched his head, instantly arriving at the location where Ross had been executed. His high-profile appearance immediately attracted the attention of several officials waiting nearby. Vice President Rodriguez rushed to John almost immediately. Mr. John, Dr. Pym is currently in contact. I wonder if the conversation with Dr. Otto went well? Not bad, your efficiency is quite good. John nodded. When will Ross be executed? Thank you for your praise, I will certainly continue to work hard. The Vice President rubbed his hands together and smiled. According to procedure, the execution is scheduled for 10 minutes later, but if you wish, you can move it earlier. No need, that's fine. I'll go in and wait. John said, walking into the prison, while the Vice President tactfully followed half a step behind. But then, remembering something, Rodriguez leaned forward again and said, Mr. John, do you still remember the surprise we talked about this morning? Oh, you're ready? John asked curiously. Yes, just now, we have seized all of Ross's assets, including a seaside villa under his name, which I have taken the liberty of transferring to your name. Rodriguez smiled modestly. His villa has been completely renovated, ensuring there are no traces of Ross's personal presence. You can move in the same day if you wish. John stopped in his tracks, his gaze fixed on the Vice President before him. The man's appearance subconsciously reminded him of Duolong, from Stephen Chow's version of The Deer and the Cauldron. Chapter 56. A Homelander who loves learning foreign languages. Good, you did very well. John praised the Vice President repeatedly upon hearing his actions. Thinking about how Ross's estate would all belong to him after the old man's death, John felt a surge of satisfaction. Thank you for the praise. Actually, I took it upon myself to do something else, the vice president said quietly. John remained silent, waiting for him to continue, but the other man said hesitantly, personally, I think that regarding your relationship with General Ross, it's better to resolve things peacefully than to let them fester. John's eyes narrowed upon hearing this. Vice President, are you clear-headed? At that moment, John decided that if this guy didn't have a sufficient reason, he would make him and Ross line up for target practice. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that the guy's previous behavior made him suspect something was amiss, he wouldn't even want to hear the reason. He would have already turned him into a bloody mess with his heat vision. Actually, it's like this. Thaddeus Ross also has a Ross family behind him. After learning about this, they specifically came to me to communicate with you on their behalf, the vice president explained quietly. So you took their bribes to persuade me to let Ross go? You can't be that stupid, can you? John asked. Of course not. Ross's actions have seriously endangered national security. Killing him would be the only way to appease public anger. Rodriguez said indignantly, then added, however, the Ross family behind them feels that this might not be enough to quell your anger, so they want to compensate you a little more. Oh, what is their compensation? John's lips curled up. If he had known that Ross had a Ross family behind him, he might have actually wiped them out as well. The Ross family is considering your current high school education, so they think it's necessary to find you a tutor to help you with your studies. Rodriguez said with a serious face, isn't it because General Ross's daughter happens to be a professor at Culver University, so they thought. John's eyes widened slightly, he put his hand to his lips, and lowered his voice, tell me more. Plan works. Rodriguez was delighted to know from John's expression that things were going well. He explained, after many negotiations, Betty Ross agreed to the compensation terms for tutoring you, and she's currently at Ross's seaside villa. Her father was going to be killed by me, how could she agree? You can't force a relationship. If she doesn't want to, then forget it, let her go with her father. Of course, no problem. To compensate for the time I've spent tutoring you, I've personally paid her some hard-to-refuse compensation. I guarantee she's absolutely voluntary, so you don't need to feel guilty, Rodriguez assured him. Good job. John patted Rodriguez's shoulder with delight. How did you know I like studying? It's better to resolve a conflict than to let it fester. You flatter me. Rodriguez checked the time. General Ross is about to be executed, let's go inside. John nodded and continued walking inside, with the vice president following discreetly behind him. Entering the execution grounds of the prison, John almost immediately noticed the elderly figure with a hood over his head in the center of the area. Ross's once neat military uniform had been replaced by a coarse orange prison garb, and he was forced to kneel on the ground, his hands and feet bound by shackles. His injured body, which needed rest, was forced into this prison position, the intense pain causing him to be drenched in cold sweat. Even so, he continued to struggle, his aged, hoarse voice screaming, "This is definitely a conspiracy. I've been framed. I demand a retrial. Does anyone recognize me? I am General Ross. Whoever saves me, I will split my fortune with him. Let's talk. This is definitely a misunderstanding. I don't care who's behind you, or what your demands are, I'll grant them." Ross screamed desperately, his voice distorted by the pain, sounding like a leaky sack. Looking at Ross's hunched body, John's lips curled into a smile. He stepped forward and pulled the hood off Ross's head. "General Ross, do you recognize me?" John asked. The hood was removed, and the change in surrounding light caused Ross's eyes to momentarily feel uncomfortable. After a few seconds, when the light subsided, Ross's eyes widened as he looked at John's face. "Killer." Slap. John slapped him to the ground. "Killer is dead. You killed him. Now I'm Homelander." Ross lay on the ground, the pressure causing excruciating pain in his cracked bones, but the physical pain couldn't mask the bewilderment in his mind. He never imagined that the culprit behind all his suffering was the supposedly dead killer. Seeing Ross still stunned, John grabbed his head and pulled him up, saying, "So, what do you think?" "Like before. Just kill me," Ross said bluntly. After realizing that the one who captured him was Killer, he had already given up hope of survival. Tisk. Seeing Ross's defiant attitude, John clicked his tongue in displeasure and slapped him to the ground again. Looking at the other man's swollen, bruised face, John laughed. "Don't worry, you definitely won't survive. I'll release all your dirt and have you cast into a kneeling steel statue in Times Square. You. Hearing that he would be disgraced even in death, Ross glared fiercely at John. As for your family, I'm kind-hearted and won't touch them. After all, it's better to resolve conflicts than to create them. John got up and left, casually adding before he left, "Don't worry, I'll take good care of your daughter. Betty. You nemesis." At this moment, Ross completely broke down, like a hound with broken limbs, barking incessantly at John. "Keep talking, I'm listening," John said nonchalantly, walking to the chair the vice president had specially prepared for him, then crossing his legs and waving his hand lightly. The executioners immediately raised their guns, aiming at Ross's head, but John stopped them a moment later. "Stop, stop, stop. What are you doing? A semi-automatic rifle?" John said sternly. "Change it to a Thompson submachine gun. And don't let others laugh at us, thinking we can't afford bullets." John ordered, "Enough bullets. Fire him 1,000 rounds first. When he's weighed before cremation, I want him to be 10 pounds heavier." To meet all the demands of the fatherland, the vice president nodded from the side. The men immediately began preparing submachine guns for target practice on Ross. The sound of target practice in the prison continued intermittently for several minutes, during which dozens of reloadings were performed. According to the people collecting the body, after much searching, they finally managed to gather Ross's fragments from the shrapnel. Chapter 57 The Hulk. High above New York City, John flew towards the address the vice president had given him, guided by his mental image. Having dealt with Ross, the persistent thorn in his side, John, feeling a sense of clarity, decided to also clear his mind in other parts of his body. Remembering the vice president's knowing expression before he left, John sensed things weren't so simple. His supersonic body tore through the atmosphere, creating sonic booms, and successfully located Ross's seaside villa. This should be it. John gazed at the exquisitely decorated villa nestled against the mountainside overlooking the sea. Just seeing the exterior told him it was incredibly expensive, something Ross, even on his general salary, couldn't afford. This made John inwardly curse Ross. He was definitely undermining capitalism. He stepped forward and politely rang the doorbell. With a soft tinkling, the door opened gently, and John was startled to see who it was. He had assumed it was Betty, but it turned out to be an equally beautiful woman. Seeing John standing at the door, the woman smiled shyly and said, "Homelander, come in. The vice president has arranged everything here." "Okay." John nodded and went straight in, but he was immediately stunned by the sight inside. In this villa, exquisite chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting a soft glow, and the marble tiles on the floor were as smooth as a mirror. After passing through the foyer, one entered the living room on the first floor, its decor a blend of classic and modern styles. The exquisite sofas and matching coffee tables were all crafted by top furniture brands. Just one glance was enough for John to know that Rodriguez's renovation had indeed been quite elaborate. But what amazed John most was not the villa's decor, but the 4 or 5 exquisitely beautiful women sitting or reclining before him. As if to test John's preferences, each woman, besides being uniformly beautiful, possessed a unique charm and temperament. Their attire complemented their individual styles, ranging from mature and sophisticated to elegant and approachable, and their personalities from aloof and cool to playful and lively. Upon John's arrival, the group immediately lined up, as if awaiting a leader's inspection. "Mr. John, the vice president knows you enjoy learning, so he specially sent us to tutor you," one of the girls said. "Don't worry, each of us has at least a master's degree, tutoring you is more than enough." Corruption. So corrupt, John thought bitterly. How can they waste national resources like this just because I love learning? Rodriguez truly understands me. Among them, John immediately noticed a woman with a worried and weary look in her eyes. It was undoubtedly Ross's daughter, Betty. Seeing John approach, she quickly stepped forward and stared at him, asking, "How is my father? What do you think?" Betty lowered her head, a flicker of pain in her eyes, then looked up with a determined gaze, asking, "In that case, Rodriguez promised not to pursue the matter." John waved his hand, interrupting her, "I don't care what Rodriguez promised you, I believe he will honestly carry out the deal. Right now, only one word is on my mind." John's lips curled into a smile. He gently pulled Betty's stiff body closer and whispered in her ear, "Charge. If your brain can't control your penis, then it's your boss." John perfectly exemplified this with his subsequent actions. Betty stayed there from afternoon until evening. During this time, The expressions on the other four women's faces shifted from curiosity to surprise to shock, and finally to numbness. John, in the past, was constrained by various conditions. The doctor's guidance. John said with certainty in the evening. He reattached the venom suit to himself, and with a relaxed expression, pushed open the door and walked out amidst the astonished gazes of those around him. Behind him was Betty. Finally over, Betty glanced at the wall clock. "Are you all right?" the girls beside her asked with concern. Betty shook her head slightly, about to speak, when the door that John had closed before leaving clicked open again. Whoosh! John raised an eyebrow. Walking is over, back to studying, but seeing Betty's expression, John, knowing he couldn't neglect any subject, looked at the other four teachers and said, "Then you can teach me from now on, all-round development, right?" Okay. Recalling the previous scene, the other four nodded expectantly, yet with a hint of fear. Late at night, at the entrance of the U.S. military base, a man wearing a thin white vest was pushed out by a soldier. "Go on, don't cause trouble again, or we'll catch you again," the officer warned the man. "Are you really just letting me go like this?" Bruce Banner asked incredulously. They had deployed at least a company of soldiers to capture him, and now that they had actually caught him, they were letting him go. "Didn't you hear me say leave? Ross is dead, and the higher-ups aren't interested in you anymore." "Don't be ungrateful," the officer said impatiently. "Ross is dead?" Bruce exclaimed in surprise, but immediately thought of his ex-girlfriend Betty, who definitely needed his comfort. "Can I borrow your phone to make a call?" Banner asked. "What a hassle," the officer grumbled, but didn't refuse, handing over his phone. Using his girlfriend's number from memory, Bruce Banner dialed, and it connected successfully after a dozen seconds. "Hello, is this Betty?" Bruce said nervously. "I've been released now, and I heard about Ross, your father's situation, so, Bruce." As soon as Betty spoke, Bruce heard her somewhat hoarse voice, and his heart ached. Ross's death must have made her cry herself hoarse. Just then, through the phone, Bruce heard another faint male voice. "Teacher, is that your ex-boyfriend? You can answer first. I'm going to find another teacher to help with homework." "Betty, are you helping students with their homework?" Banner asked with concern over the phone. "Take care of yourself. You don't need to work so hard." But to Banner's surprise, his concern was met with rejection from his ex-girlfriend. "Banner, let's not contact each other anymore, beep beep." With a busy tone on the phone, Banner stood there, stunned. Chapter 58 Peter Parker's Amazing Adventure. At the entrance of the military base, in the dark, cold wind, Bruce stood there, stunned. So dazed was he that he didn't even notice the officer beside him taking back his phone. Why? Banner's eyes were vacant, filled with bewilderment at his ex-girlfriend's rejection. Now that Ross was dead and he was out of prison, theoretically nothing should be able to stop their love, so why? From the darkness, a figure in a black leather jacket emerged from a dark corner, giving Banner a pitying look before speaking. "Professor Bruce, I think we can talk." Bruce turned his head hesitantly to look at the man wearing a black eye patch. "Who are you?" "You can call me Nick Fury, currently the director of SHIELD." The man introduced himself. "SHIELD, what kind of organization is that?" Bruce asked. "And what do you want with me?" SHIELD is a special organization under the International Security Council, dedicated to handling various paranormal events, Nick Fury said, looking at Bruce. "You're currently unemployed, aren't you? That's why we want to hire you." "Hire me to study the green monster inside me?" Bruce's eyes flashed with wariness. No, the monster inside you isn't of much research value to us at the moment." Nick Fury waved his hand. "The abomination blood samples created using your serum have already been officially acquired and are under intensive development. We're only hiring you to join and assist in the research. At SHIELD, top biologists are working on deciphering the abomination's genes. They've already reverse-engineered a controllable serum, but injection will cause irreversible, malignant changes to body shape, personality, and appearance." Bruce's expression changed. They'd successfully reverse-engineered the abomination's genes? That meant they might be mass-producing an army of abominations soon. "This invitation is simply to get your assistance in the research," Nick Fury tempted. "Don't you want to completely control the monster inside you and become a normal person again?" Bruce Banner looked at Fury, considering his girlfriend's rejection and his current unemployed status, and after hesitating for a moment, He extended his right hand. "Okay, you win." Fury smiled and shook hands with him, thinking to himself, "So easy, it seems there's no need to tell him about being cheated on. I'll keep it from him for a while." At noon, John was woken up by the phone ringing. He sat up from his 4-meter-long, soft bed and yawned softly. Looking at the delicate bodies around him, some reclining and some lying down, his brain, freed from the control of his penis, subconsciously thought for a moment, what were their names again? He seemed to have been too busy studying yesterday, and as a result, he didn't even know the names of these teachers. However, he only had a slight doubt and then stopped worrying about it. Anyway, it didn't matter. As long as he had fun, that was all that mattered. As for the names, there was no need to remember them. It wasn't like dating, where they had to get to know each other. He would find out eventually. John casually took the Venom suit from the hanger and pulled out his phone. It was Rodriguez calling. "Hello, what's up?" John answered the phone, his tone indifferent. "I'm terribly sorry to disturb your rest," Rodriguez said. "Mr. John, the list of 1,000 execution targets has been finalized. Would you like to take a look?" "Oh, send it over so I can see. I'm in a good mood today. So, I'll just pick a few to let go," John said casually. Yes, Mr. John, you're so kind," Rodriguez praised, then sent the file to John and waited quietly. John flipped through the list of execution targets and quickly noticed one name. John asked suspiciously, "What's the deal with Peter Parker? How did he get on the list?" "Oh, please wait a moment, I'll go ask him," Rodriguez replied immediately after urgently asking the person in charge of selecting the targets. "Sir, this Peter Parker was introduced to Ross's base as a senior researcher by Stark Industries. The serum that Abomination used before being injected with Bruce Banner's blood serum was one that Peter provided and researched." John thought for a moment. To prevent Peter Parker from being injected with a lizard serum, Stark had indeed given him a researcher position. He hadn't expected that Stark would directly recommend him to Ross's military base. Now, thinking about it, Abomination's freakish physique, terrifying regeneration speed, and 4 to 5 meter long tail did indeed seem like he had been injected with a lizard serum. "This is my high school classmate, let him go. Randomly select 3 handsome men from the remaining personnel and release them," John casually ordered. "Is this your classmate? Okay, I'll fire the guy in charge of the review right away." Such a big problem. The vice president immediately launched into a tirade, then asked, "The execution is scheduled for tomorrow noon. Would you like to come and observe?" John immediately refused. "No need. I'm a kind-hearted person, I can't bear to see anyone die in front of me. You can arrange it yourself." Yes, the vice president repeatedly agreed, then continued, "Regarding your fame, would you mind doing a live Q&A session with your fans? That would garner more public support." "Forget it, I have no intention of going up there to be a spectacle," John refused without hesitation. "Don't give me this kind of meaningless stuff. Next time you do something this boring, I'll slap the president and vice president on the live stream. I'm sure the public would prefer that." "Okay." Cold sweat poured down Rodriguez's forehead. "If there's nothing else, that's all for now. My phone's out of battery," John said casually before hanging up. Turning to look at the exhausted teachers sleeping on the beds, he thought he should go out and kill a few criminals for fun first. In a military base, Peter Parker was hunched over in a corner. At least 70 or 80 people were already crammed together in this cell, the heat and stench unbearable. "Why am I so unlucky?" Peter Parker complained inwardly. Through the introduction of the Nemesis and the Stark Group's mediation, he had successfully joined Ross's military base using a lizard serum sample. Once inside, with his familiarity with the formula and his own talent, he successfully rose to the rank of senior researcher at Ross's base by researching a method to eliminate the reagent side effects. But this wonderful life hadn't even lasted a few days before Ross fell, and he, along with all the high-ranking officers in the base, was imprisoned. Life was so unpredictable. Just as he was about to become depressed, the prison door was ripped open, and the guard, looking at the room full of former base high-ranking officers, asked, "Who is Peter Parker?" Chapter 59 Southern prisoners transferred to the north. Inside the prison, the guard opened the door and called roll. Hearing his name called, Peter Parker looked up eagerly, as if grasping at a lifeline, and said, "I'm Peter Parker." "Okay, come with me." The guard grabbed Peter Parker and pulled his thin body to his feet. Amidst the pleas and curses of those around him, Peter Parker followed the guard out of the cell in a daze. Only after feeling the midday sun did he come to his senses and ask, "I'm released?" "More than that, you've been transferred to the research facility next door, starting directly from senior management." The guard said enviously, "Why didn't you say you knew Homelander earlier? If you had, you wouldn't have been in here." "Huh? Who's Homelander?" Peter Parker asked in confusion. "I only know Nexus." "Are you crazy?" the guard said urgently. "You'd better not say that word now. He's Homelander. The higher-ups said you and Homelander were high school classmates, so they gave us the privilege of pardoning you. Nexus is now called Homelander? And he's my high school classmate." Peter Parker's eyes widened. Seeing Peter's confusion, the guard explained simply, "It seems you don't understand at all, John Kent. He's Homelander, and it's because of him that you were released." "No wonder. That makes sense." Peter Parker suddenly realized. Recalling the nemesis who suddenly appeared before he was about to inject the serum, the only possible explanation was a classmate who was always around. He hadn't expected to be saved again. For a moment, Peter Parker felt a surge of relief. On the helicarrier, Nick Fury faced the council's higher-ranking officials with a serious expression. "Nick Fury, what's the matter at this meeting?" the U.S. Council representative asked. "I learned from Tony Stark that there's news that could affect the world," Nick Fury said solemnly. "In 3 months, Earth may be invaded by DC." "What do you mean?" The entire council was stunned. "Invaded by DC? So one corrupted Superman wasn't enough?" According to Stark's relay of Homelander's words, in 3 months, villains like the Joker, Doomsday, and Darkseid might step out of fantasy and into reality, Nick Fury said. "Fury, can you confirm the accuracy of this information?" The entire council member became serious. Because of John's situation, they had all contributed to DC Comics sales these past few days, and were naturally very clear about who Doomsday and Darkseid were. Nick Fury nodded. "I believe Stark wouldn't joke about this, and it also aligns with the dark matter fluctuations over the past 20 years. If Homelander is currently the Emperor of America, then Tony Stark, as his only friend, is naturally America's equal." Because of John, the military and political circles, who had originally planned to use various pressures to obtain Stark's micro-reactor technology, have completely backed down and abandoned their plans. Since it's Stark's certification, these people can't help but believe it somewhat, but this only makes them feel worse. Having a corrupted Homelander was already bad enough, but now they're being told that in 3 months there will be an even worse Doomsday, who only knows destruction, and Darkseid, who rules multiple worlds. America, no, the entire Earth is going to be doomed. The American representative clutched his head in frustration. "Do you know which version it is?" a representative asked, only to receive a slow shake of the head from Nick Fury. "Damn it, if it's the movie version, we might be able to put up a fight, since the special effects aren't as impressive. But if it's the comic book version, Earth might not even survive. Even if it's the movie version, our current technology can't compete. Don't forget the Doomsday's ever-growing strength. Aren't there any superheroes joining the fray, like the Flash and Wonder Woman? Facing Darkseid, unless it's a plot device or a higher version character fighting a lower version character, even having the Flash and Wonder Woman wouldn't be enough. The Flash can reboot. As long as he doesn't die at the start, there might be a glimmer of hope." In an instant, because of Fury's message, these council representatives began discussing the DC Comics plot across their screens, seriously debating the combat power of each character. At this moment, they didn't know that Stark's information wasn't accurate, or rather, not entirely correct. 3 months later, DC characters would indeed arrive, but it wouldn't be just DC characters. After a series of oral exercises, the council representatives immediately reported the matter to their respective countries. Soon, the heads of state secretly held various meetings to discuss the impending crisis. After tense discussions, in order to cope with the upcoming crisis, the countries decided that if the situation was true, they would release some of the military's genetic research results to the public. This included, but was not limited to, powerful serums originally intended for military use, such as super soldier serums with no side effects and lizard serums, in an effort to help humanity survive more in the future crisis. Of course, due to cost issues, even the cheapest serums that enhance physical fitness are currently more expensive than the equivalent of gold, priced at as high as $10,000 per vial. Super soldier serums would cost at least $100,000, but the price would drop significantly after mass production. Of course, this is all premature, as they decided to only release the serums to the public after witnessing a monster invasion. Currently, these serums are only being used in small quantities by high-ranking military and police personnel. John never imagined that his casual remark would sway the fate of Earth and the Marvel Universe. Perhaps when Thanos arrives on Earth, he'll face a world where everyone is a martial arts master. At the end of the month, at a shooting range somewhere in New York, John looked at the death row inmate speaking Spanish with a bewildered expression, then turned to Rodriguez. "You mean these are Americans?" "Actually, it's like this." Seeing John's question, Rodriguez quickly explained the results of the White House meeting regarding the list, making John exclaim, "Holy crap!" "Fine, whatever." John figured it didn't matter anyway, they were all death row inmates, so killing one or the other wouldn't make a difference, and nodded in agreement to their underhanded operation. Rodriguez secretly breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, he had prepared a plan B. He had already prepared 10,000 American criminals serving life sentences beforehand. If John really disagreed, he would have to use these backup candidates. "In that case, I'll get started." John grinned and leaped to the center of the prison below. Under the gaze of the surrounding death row inmates, John said no more, a crimson light flashing from his eyes. In an instant, his body nimbly spun around, and in a flash, without the slightest sound, the heads of the tens of thousands of prisoners in the arena rolled all over the ground. Chapter 60: The Homelander Who Strives to Train. Inside the prison's massive execution ground, John stood in the center. Around him lay tens of thousands of corpses, all dressed in prison uniforms, their enormous heads scattered across the ground. The intense heat from the thermal vision had completely charred the areas around the cuts. No blood gushed out, but the smell of roasted meat gradually rose with the steam. Ugh! Suddenly seeing tens of thousands of humans die before them, smelling the scorching flesh of their own kind, the guards around them couldn't help but gag. John, however, watched with satisfaction as the progress bar, which had been nearing zero, increased by 3%. Keep in mind, the new progress bar had 100 times the capacity of the original, so John was quite pleased with this increase. "I only need to kill about 320,000 more to level up. Not bad, not bad," John thought to himself, satisfied. This single mob had done 3 times the work he'd done in the past 6 months. After dealing with the criminals before him, John's eyes searched through the pile of corpses, relying on his memory. Soon, 2 heads were pulled from the sea of bodies. He lightly leaped to Rodriguez's side, tossing the 2 heads at his feet. These 2 were framed. "Find out who framed them, and then add the most serious offenders to the next list," John said to the vice president. During the killings, he had been monitoring the progress bar. Only when these 2 died did the system alert him that the progress had been slightly reduced, indicating their crimes weren't serious enough to warrant the death penalty. "No problem, Mr. John, I will order my men to investigate thoroughly. Also, based on your abilities, I think my KPI is too low. Double the number of people you need to submit next month." "Let me see where your limits are," John said. Okay." Hearing this, Rodriguez looked hesitant but nodded in agreement. However, John was nowhere to be seen. John had left without even confirming their opinions after stating his demands. He trusted they wouldn't refuse. After all, if these people couldn't do it well, he could simply replace them with a more capable group. With over 300 million people in the US, plenty would be willing to be his lackey if he wanted. In a base deep in the mountains, Bruce Banner stared blankly at the operator examining his genetic sample. He didn't know when it started, but his principles had crumbled step by step. From initially agreeing to join SHIELD, to studying Abomination's genetic fragments together, to conducting a comprehensive physical examination of Banner, and then, since the tests were already done, comparing Banner's and Abomination's genetic fragments didn't seem like a big deal. In short, by the time Bruce realized what was happening, his blood had already been taken for analysis. Incredible, Banner. Although Abomination is a combination of your genes, its potential is nowhere near yours. The genetics expert in front of him excitedly grabbed Banner's shoulder. You have the ability to grow stronger the angrier you get. Your body grows enormous due to anger, and there's no limit to that. On the other hand, Abomination only temporarily surpasses you in its basic form. It hasn't even copied a fraction of your genes. Professor Odin, human anger has its limits. Banner looked at the expert and said, Once anger reaches a threshold, it's difficult to increase it further. But we can raise your anger threshold through technological means. The professor said excitedly. So-called anger is nothing more than a reaction of brain hormones. I don't believe you can still be angry after having your frontal lobe removed. The professor's words gave Bruce goosebumps. He subconsciously took a step back and said, "What do you want to do?" Realizing he had overreacted, Odin chuckled dryly and said, "Since we can stop you from being angry through external intervention, we can certainly make your anger unstoppable. All it takes is for the corona radiata of the brain, which controls emotions, to release signals to the hypothalamus, causing the adrenal cortex to secrete cortisol, which will make the body involuntarily angry. Certain stimulants can do that." Odin looked at Banner excitedly and said, "The technology involved is very simple. If you want to do it, I can do it today. Do you want to give it a try?" "I think I'll pass." Banner forced a smile. His life at the research institute was very comfortable, and there was no place to fight, so there was no need to pursue power. Faced with Banner's refusal, Odin did not insist, but just sighed and said, "Sigh, then forget it. You can come to me anytime when you change your mind." "No problem." Banner nodded, not taking it seriously. Hawaiian Islands. A beautiful island that was once bustling with people has now been turned into a private area. John lay on the beach, quietly watching Betty, who was tutoring him, his hands naturally resting on the back of his head. Yes, he was now training seriously, preparing for the changes that the Ancient One was talking about 2 months later. The warm sunlight shone on his face, then was absorbed by the cells in his body. Because the Kryptonian cells in his body had been modified to a super-powerful version, even the utilization rate of absorbing sunlight was 10,000 times higher than the original version. Now, he gains thousands of tons of strength every day just from absorbing sunlight. It can be said that the daily increase in strength alone is equivalent to the fusion with the previous version of himself. Now, he can lift objects weighing millions of tons with just his arm strength and throw them at subsonic speeds. If given the opportunity, he could lift a giant object and spend a few minutes reaching outer space, then drop it with the impact force of 40 or 50 times the speed of sound, instantly destroying a city. But it's still not enough, John sighed, looking at Betty, who was teaching seriously, and urged, "Faster." Compared to the crisis that the Ancient One mentioned 2 months later, this strength was still somewhat lacking. Fortunately, there were tall people to hold up the sky if it fell. If there was something he couldn't beat, he would let the Ancient One go first. If the Ancient One was also defeated, then he definitely couldn't win either. He would just replenish his strength and come back for revenge when he was strong enough. Besides, who says all those from other worlds are bad? If a few more strong, good people like myself came, maybe the Ancient One would entrust the responsibility of protecting humanity to someone else. Forget it, I'll just go to outer space and shine on the sun later. John looked at the blazing sun radiating light and heat in the sky and made up his mind. Half an hour later, John, who had no interest in studying, hastily finished the battle, explained a few things to Rodriguez, and left Earth. And with that departure, 2 months of time on Earth passed in the blink of an eye. Chapter 61: Chaos Across the Land. 2 months later, in the White House, USA. President Ellis tapped the table impatiently, looking at Rodriguez. "Still no news from Homelander? It's been 2 months. Homelander still hasn't contacted us." "In fact, he completely cut off contact 2 months ago," Rodriguez replied. Ellis felt helpless. If things were peaceful on Earth, he'd rather Homelander simply disappeared. But now, the predicted deadline was approaching, and with a formidable enemy looming, Homelander's continued absence was causing widespread panic. Damn it, he might have run away, Ellis couldn't help but speculate, his mind filled with John's less than honorable character, greatly increasing the likelihood of Homelander's escape. "There's no need to panic. Things aren't actually that bad, are they?" the newly appointed Secretary of State said. "In the past 2 months, we've mass-produced 200 Abomination soldiers. Even if the otherworldly visitors appear, we're not without a fighting chance." Rodriguez nodded in agreement. Besides, Homelander said before he left that what's coming might not be enemies like Doomsday or Darkseid. There might be some kind-hearted individuals who come here, and we can absorb them to protect ourselves. "Let's hope so," Ellis sighed. Several days ago, he had ordered the people to stay home and not go out, but the freedom-loving American masses ignored the announcement and continued to eat and play as usual. While these presidents waited anxiously for what would happen, more than 2 million kilometers away from the sun in deep space, John's sleeping body was orbiting the sun at high speed. At this moment, the high-speed movement of his body seemed to have reached a delicate balance with the sun's gravity. A quick push would free him from the sun's gravity, casting him into deep space. A slow push might capture him, pulling him into its burning surface. This was the safe distance John had set for himself. While solar energy was the source of Superman's power, everything required a gradual approach. Just as a car battery could explode from overcharging, Superman also faced the risk of dying from absorbing too much energy. Even an all-star Superman died from over-absorbing too much. His own version of Superman, with his small arms and legs, needed to proceed cautiously. The blinding sunlight beat down on his body, the ultraviolet rays being rapidly absorbed before they even reacted with his skin, resulting in John's skin remaining as white as ever even after 2 months of sunbathing. Suddenly, John's eyelids twitched slightly, and his consciousness slowly awoke from his slumber. His eyes slowly opened, staring directly at the star before him, his rapidly moving body coming to a sudden halt. 2 months, John murmured to himself. He clenched his fist lightly, feeling that his strength had increased about tenfold during this period of sleep. John gazed at the magnificent planet 150 million kilometers away. It's time to go back and see how Earth is doing. 10 minutes later, the entire Earth, no, the entire Marvel Infinite Multiverse, was undergoing violent changes. In New York City, dozens of giant pythons as thick as buckets appeared out of nowhere, startling the screams of the crowd. In India, goblins inexplicably emerged from the murky waters of the Ganges, and within moments, hundreds of goblins, as thin as withered trees, appeared amidst the curious gazes of the crowd. In a Japanese garden, a man wondered why a stranger had suddenly appeared in his home when the uninvited guests had instantly split into 8 pieces and lunged at him. In Asgard, Thor, holding a grand feast, was astonished to see a skinned wild boar suddenly appear on his table. Inside Thanos' spaceship, a female student in a Japanese school uniform stared blankly at the changing environment around her. In a certain Marvel universe, a man holding a spinning top stared blankly at the barren planet beneath his feet, then instantly activated the elven power within him, enveloping his body. Instantly, the entire Marvel universe erupted in chaos. Rewinding 10 minutes, John floated silently in the void of outer space. He was waiting for the Ancient One to retrieve him. Otherwise, the distance of 150 million kilometers from Earth, a journey that even light takes 8 minutes to complete, how long would it take him? In fact, it was the Ancient One who had dropped him near the sun, and he had given instructions beforehand to be pulled back just before the time was up. The wait wasn't long. A sparkling circle of light quickly formed in front of him, and he immediately rushed towards it at full speed. Whoosh! Back on Earth, the silence was instantly replaced by clamor. Due to the pressure difference, although the circle of light closed quickly, the room the Ancient One had prepared to receive him was suddenly filled with a fierce wind. In a few more minutes, we should be ready to welcome those unfamiliar guests. Guyi remained as calm as ever, though John could tell from the slightly bulging veins on her arms that she wasn't entirely confident. No problem, you handle it. If I can't handle something, I'll do it myself. I won't stubbornly resist. John shrugged. Guyi looked helplessly at the seemingly indifferent man before her and said, I've already sent my disciples out to prepare for the disaster in their respective cities, and the governments of various countries are also making preparations in advance. No wonder, John suddenly realized. He was wondering why it was so quiet here. They had all been sent out. By the way, are you really not going to tell your disciples that you accepted the power of the dark dimension? It's good for them to be mentally prepared, otherwise they might turn against you. John advised Guyi. Guyi slowly shook her head. It's alright, they'll find out sooner or later. John pursed his lips at Guyi's laissez-faire approach and said nothing, then sat quietly and waited. He carried no means of communication with the outside world. The phone Rodriguez had given him had been tossed to Betty before he left. 10 minutes passed quickly. They're here. The Ancient One manipulated the time stone, her eyes piercing through countless futures, beginning to foresee the future second by second. In a mere instant, several portals crackling with electricity appeared before John. Time manipulation is really cheating, John said enviously, watching the Ancient One cast her spell. Then he focused his gaze on one of the portals, an unknown enemy. I'm getting a little nervous. With that, he slowly rose and flew into the portal. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62: A Difference of 10,000 Times. In New York City, dozens of enormous pythons, each as thick as a bucket, coiled into a ball, suddenly appeared on the street. The massive sphere, originally shaped like a mating formation, instantly scattered, even crushing over a dozen pedestrians. The sudden change in environment momentarily extinguished their desire to mate. Their enormous vertical pupils scanned the surroundings, probing their surroundings. The once bustling street was now filled with screams. The pythons' enormous, ferocious appearance and the stench they emitted instilled a sense of deathly fear in them. Seemingly startled by the swarms of prey, the pythons flicked their tongues, their brown eyes flashing with ferocity, opening their blood-red jaws to tear at the humans. Sizzle! High in the distance, a red light flashed, instantly slicing dozens of pythons, including several buildings, into pieces. Done. John looked down at the ripped ground, the collapsed buildings, and the remaining snake carcasses struggling in their final moments, then turned and disappeared into the circle of light behind him. Below, the Ancient One's disciple, who had been about to intervene to save the person, stared blankly at the dismembered snake body before him. In Kamartaj, John, who had reappeared, didn't communicate with the Ancient One who was casting a spell, but instead turned and rushed into another circle of light. The Ancient One didn't say anything, using the time stone to foresee the future throughout. As the Ancient One said, there was no way to observe those unknown beings before they entered this space. But once they entered the Marvel Universe, they lost their unknown nature and were accepted by the Marvel Universe's system. The Ancient One was currently using the time stone to predict what had happened in the universe a moment before. Thus, as long as someone entered the universe before the Ancient One used the time stone and caused some damage in the future timeline, the Ancient One could pinpoint their location through news or the internet, and then directly send John to open the box in reality. Egypt, Cairo. John appeared through the circle of light. As soon as he appeared, he was startled by the roars of a wild beast beside him. On the street, a 10-meter-tall, giant black-skinned ape was constantly leaning against the wall, pounding its chest and letting out a series of howls. The surrounding crowd stared in terror at the colossal creature before them, their legs trembling and unable to move. "Shut up!" John grumbled impatiently, throwing a punch that instantly shattered the giant ape and the building behind it. A torrent of blood gushed forth, staining the surroundings crimson, and John had vanished, heading towards his next destination. Egypt, France, England, Japan. As he traveled to each location, the number of halos before the Ancient One at Kamartaj increased, growing to over 1,000, and still increasing. While not everyone who came to Earth was a monster, most intelligent beings, faced with a sudden change in their surroundings, would choose to lie low and assess the situation. Only those truly confident in their strength or those who were utterly reckless would immediately emerge, resulting in John mostly fighting wild beasts. John, who had just returned from the mission point, complained about the large number of glowing circles in front of him. "Hey, that's enough, isn't it? Most of the monsters can be suppressed with firepower. There's no need for me to take action. Just mark a few of the more threatening ones, and leave the rest to their respective governments. Give them some room to maneuver." The Ancient One didn't object, silently nodding, and with a wave of her hand, the glowing circles in front of him immediately narrowed, leaving only 3 passages remaining. These are finally getting interesting. John, full of anticipation, got up and disappeared into the glowing circles. Where are the enemies? John flew out of the passage and found himself on a street covered with Japanese writing, without seeing anything unusual. Because he flew out from the air, looking down at the ground below, he immediately attracted the attention of the people strolling below. "Look, it's Homelander. It really is him. What's that glowing circle behind Homelander? A portal? What's he doing here?" Various discussions in Japanese came from below, but John ignored them, instead quickly observing the people. Using his X-ray vision, he quickly noticed something amiss. In the crowd, a thin, hunched old man with a receding hairline, dressed in a white yellow robe, was following the flow of people, his gaze fixed on him. Through his ability, John could see that the man had no internal organs or bones, he seemed entirely composed of blood. The instant he spotted his opponent, John swooped down, his right palm covering the old man's deformed, enormous head, and slammed it down. Boom. By the time those around reacted, the gushing blood had completely stained the onlookers within a 5-meter radius. Ah! A piercing scream echoed from the surroundings, and in an instant, a vast, empty space formed around him. John remained silently watching the mangled body embedded in the ground before him. In the attack, he had found that the old man had no ability to resist, as if he were truly just an ordinary person. John didn't have to wait long before the corpse began to change. The old man's head, which had been pushed into his chest cavity, was slowly recovering, and his short body was gradually expanding, with bone armor beginning to sprout from his skin. As its head fully emerged, the monster before him, which had transformed from an old man into a burly man, murmured, "I understand. I understand too." John's lips curled into a smile. Everything that had happened before him reminded him of this guy's identity. Nururihayan, the 100-point boss in Gantz, possessed the ability of infinite adaptation. As long as it could understand an attack, it could evolve a corresponding ability to adapt to it. Theoretically, this power was very strong, but unfortunately, its evolution speed was too slow. Before him, after the transformation, Nururihayan's originally less than 1.5 meters tall, hunched body had grown to 2.3 meters, its skin now covered by an exoskeleton to defend against physical blows. Human. Nururihayan's crimson eyes fixed on John, and it slammed its exoskeleton-covered right fist into John's chest, but it couldn't break through his defenses. In the blink of an eye, its right hand evolved once again into a sharp-boned sword, while its body became leaner, and its physical strength increased dramatically once more. Just as it was about to attack, John's right hand had already slammed onto its skull, instantly crushing the upper half of its head. Its current strength is around 100 tons, and it's constantly increasing exponentially. Combined with its super-powerful regenerative abilities, given time, it might really keep getting stronger. John recalled his past encounters with the abomination, his feelings slightly complicated. But quickly, a smile returned to his face, and he dragged the gradually recovering head of the ninja troll towards the atmosphere at a speed that surged to 40 times Mach in a short period. Too bad I'm 100,000 times stronger than you now, you idiot. Chapter 63 Raditz. Above Shibuya, Tokyo, a humanoid figure ascended at speeds exceeding Mach 10. In his right hand, he gripped a skeletonized body. The Nururihayan was helplessly held by John's immense strength. If not for the biofield protecting it, the terrifying air currents from its movement alone would have torn its body apart. I understand. I understand. I understand, the Nururihayan murmured repeatedly, and then a dramatic change occurred. To counter John's supersonic speed, a thin membrane covered its eyes to withstand the intense air currents, while its pupils gradually adapted to the rapidly changing environment. Then, for flight, tiny holes appeared on its exoskeleton, from which powerful jets of air propelled it forward. Faced with John's overwhelming power, its struggles grew stronger with each expansion and contraction of its body. John observed all these changes, and after reaching tens of kilometers above the ground, he finally released all restraints and withdrew the biofield. Almost instantly, the Nururihayan, still moving at dozens of times the speed of sound after leaving the safe zone, was torn apart as if it had been put into a grinding mill. Sizzle. In the intense airflow, the Nururihayan's body was ripped into bloody mist. All its previous evolution seemed like a joke. But almost instantly, high in the sky, the nearly pulverized Nururihayan's body began to reassemble, muttering again, I understand. You understand what the hell? A roar exploded from John's mouth. With a powerful body unaffected by any force field, John delivered a straightforward straight punch to the healing Nururihayan. The next moment, the fist unleashed a terrifying shockwave visible to the naked eye. A powerful, sharply angled airflow enveloped the Nururihayan's body, its terrifying power capable of pulverizing it again. But John knew this wasn't enough. A purely physical attack would allow the Nururihayan's body to regenerate almost instantly. However, one punch wasn't enough. Then another punch. Before the air cannon could expand, John raised his fist again and threw a punch from behind Nururihayan. Then came the third, the fourth. In an instant, Nururihayan felt hundreds of energy blasts simultaneously striking him, the terrifying pressure compressing him inwards. Boom 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 boom. The continuous explosions, carrying terrifying power, dissipated all the clouds within a kilometer radius, revealing the original azure sky. A minute later, John, having unleashed tens of thousands of straight punches, stopped attacking and flew into the still lingering turbulence, his right hand reaching forward to grab. A scarlet meatball the size of an egg was clutched in his hand. This was the pissing beef ball formed from Nuru-Ryan's tens of thousands of punches. To ensure complete annihilation, he decided not to let even a scrap of flesh escape. Gazing at the still struggling, expanding flesh in his hand, a fierce red light erupted from John's eyes, illuminating the meatball in his hand and completely destroying the compressed flesh. I understand. In his final moments, Nuru-Ryan felt his body dissolving, yet still managed to utter his last words with difficulty. Okay. John looked at the completely carbonized sphere, gently rubbing his hands together. As the ashes scattered across the sky, he successfully dealt with his enemy. It's time to go back. This took a bit too long, John murmured to himself, diving downwards. He returned to Kamartaj through a spatial portal. But the Ancient One, who had been sitting there, was nowhere to be seen. Where is she? John asked in surprise, then his expression changed as he considered a possibility. Africa, Lubumbashi, a city in Congo. A man with a tail appeared out of thin air. This man wore unusual armor, had long, flowing hair reaching his waist, and his left eye was covered by a green transparent lens. He was currently looking around with his arms crossed. The sudden change in environment, it seems Kakarot and his crew were behind it. The man looked around disdainfully. The people on this planet only know how to use these strange tricks. Sizzle. Suddenly, a portal appeared before the man, and the Ancient One slowly emerged. You little monkey, are you Kakarot's reinforcements? The man spoke, the numbers on the green lens in his left eye changing rapidly. A hint of contempt quickly appeared on his face, a piece of trash with a power level of less than 5. Looking at the man before her, the Ancient One had no intention of offering any advice. Because even in her premonition, she had dealt with this person countless times. The result was always the same, he was untamed and wild. Several times, her attempts to persuade him nearly backfired, resulting in the annihilation of all life within 100 miles. With a wave of her hand, the Ancient One instantly enveloped Raditz with hundreds of spatial portals. These portals, composed of special forces, had edges that were the sharpest blades. Unless their mass could warp spacetime like a black hole, they would be easily sliced open. Fancy. Unfamiliar with the illusions, Raditz didn't intend to touch the doors that enveloped him. Instead, he unleashed blinding white light from his hands, shooting it towards the ground. Yes, he planned to obliterate the city beneath his feet with a wide-range attack. But in the instant he moved, a massive spatial portal, several meters high, appeared beneath his feet, connecting to the empty vacuum of space. In an instant, under immense pressure, a terrifying suction force ripped the man and the light waves away, and the portal immediately closed. Billions of miles away in outer space, a man floated painfully in the cosmos. In the oxygen-free environment, death slowly engulfed him. A flicker of resentment flashed in the man's eyes. How is this possible? How could I, Raditz, die so absurdly in space? How did that monkey do it? Just as he was about to succumb to death, a massive space fleet approached from afar. Raditz, as if seeing hope, manipulated his entire body's energy to fly towards it, simultaneously unleashing blinding white light from his hands to attract the attention of the fleet. Inside the fleet, Thanos focused his gaze on the distant light source, hesitated for a moment, then waved his hand, signaling his men to sail over and investigate. Why did she just disappear? Did she encounter a powerful enemy? Inside Kamartaj, John asked the returning Ancient One. She encountered an enemy with many weaknesses, but if left unattended, many people will die, the Ancient One explained. I knew it, John was certain. The Ancient One had definitely encountered a formidable enemy with a hostile nature, otherwise there would have been no need for her to make this special trip. However, since the Ancient One had successfully returned, the problem was solved, so he would now continue to deal with the enemies behind the remaining 2 light circles. Chapter 64 Odin's Decision. In the White House, Ellis's cell phone vibrated violently. Almost immediately, the president answered, holding the phone to his ear. Mr. President, just now, many giant pythons, tens of meters long, appeared out of nowhere on the streets of New York. The report came from the other end. Just as I thought. When it actually happened, Ellis abandoned any hope. He ordered, immediately evacuate the crowd, and at the same time, send the abomination squad to deal with them. Ellis's words were abruptly interrupted, and the report on the other end continued. Mr. President, the matter has been resolved. It seems Homelander has returned. Hearing that Homelander had returned, Ellis was overjoyed, then frowned and said, "What do you mean seems? To be precise, did Homelander actually come? We're not sure either. According to eyewitnesses, they only saw a red beam of light slice through the pythons and buildings. Judging from his abilities, it should have been Homelander who did it." "That means Homelander is currently in New York," Rodriguez said thankfully. At least Homelander hadn't abandoned them. But shortly after they made their decision, all sorts of intelligence came in from all over the world, and they discovered that Homelander seemed to be present all over the globe. They arrived at the scene almost immediately after the monster appeared, and disappeared immediately after dealing with it. This terrifying location tracking ability and cross-regional teleportation speed astonished the world, while also creating a strong sense of déjà vu. This high-intensity response subconsciously reminded them of John's highly individualistic style when he was still a Homelander. Back then, the Homelander was New York's #1 in fighting crime. Now, as Homelander, was he preparing to compete for the global top spot? Regardless, since Homelander has minimized the damage, our role is to reassure the public, Ellis said, looking at the compiled information. "Give the pre-recorded video to the TV stations." Rodriguez nodded slowly. They had already pre-recorded a declaration for the disaster before today, it only needed slight editing to be released immediately. Soon, under instructions, almost all media outlets and TV stations across the United States simultaneously released a video. Other countries subsequently followed suit, releasing similar statements recorded domestically. "Next, we need to recruit those we can communicate with," Rodriguez said in the evening. "Let's proceed along the path we initially discussed, which is essentially hiring a group of powerful mercenaries. It seems you've prepared quite thoroughly these past 2 months." At that moment, a familiar voice came from behind them. They quickly turned around and saw John, dressed in battle armor, floating in the air with his hands behind his back. John's gaze ignored Ellis and turned to the vice president, asking, "Are the 40,000 people who have been piling up for the past 2 months ready?" "No problem. They can come over now if you need them," Rodriguez said respectfully, bowing slightly. "There's no need," John waved his hand. "It's already past working hours. Let's deal with those people tomorrow." "So, what are you doing now?" the new Secretary of State asked. "Going back to rest, of course. Do you have any objections?" John glanced at him out of the corner of his eye. "Of course not. It's already night. No one can disturb your rest," Rodriguez said respectfully. John nodded slightly and disappeared. Only then did the Secretary of State realize that, in the terror of death, though only a few seconds had passed, his back was already soaked with cold sweat. In Asgard, the gods gathered before the Rainbow Bridge. Before them, Heimdall withdrew his powers and turned to Odin, saying, "My lord, not only Asgard, but unknown life forms have also invaded the 9 realms. It seems the days ahead will be anything but peaceful," Odin said slowly, a barely perceptible weariness in his eyes. "Just today, hundreds of all sorts of beings suddenly appeared throughout Asgard, giant beasts, humans, and even cooked food. Some of the more destructive creatures even caused death and injury to Asgard's inhabitants." "Thor!" Odin suddenly exclaimed. Thor, clad in silver armor, slowly stepped forward and said, "Father, I command you to cross the Rainbow Bridge and quell the unrest in the 9 realms." Odin, in his golden helmet, brandished his spear of eternity. "Faced with those dangerous extra-dimensional beings, we, as leaders of the 9 realms, have a responsibility to protect the safety of our people." "But father, what about Asgard?" Thor asked. "Don't worry, I'm here. Besides, this is a trial for you. When you return, all of Asgard will celebrate the birth of a new king," Odin declared firmly. "The king is preparing to abdicate." At that moment, everyone understood Odin's unspoken meaning, their expressions filled with shock. Hearing that this was a test, Thor no longer refused, nodding firmly and accepting the task. The female warriors, Sif and others, seized the opportunity to plead, "King, let us go and help Thor too." Looking at these solid followers who would become his future son's men, Odin nodded gently. "Very well, Loki, Sif, Fandral, Volstagg, and Hogun, you will go with Thor. Hildum, where in the 9 realms are the most anomalous beings?" Odin asked. "King, it's Midgard," Heimdall replied. "However, the nations within Midgard are developing rapidly, and some beings are very powerful. It's relatively peaceful at the moment." "Good, then send him to Midgard first." Odin nodded. "Yes, King." After agreeing, Heimdall turned and reminded him, "Prince, be careful of a fellow called Homelander. Your current strength is slightly inferior to his." Slightly inferior? Really? Thor recalled his arrival in Midgard hundreds of years ago, somewhat disbelieving. "Prince, just be careful. It's best not to clash with him," Heimdall repeatedly warned. All right, send us there now," Thor waved his hand dismissively, urging him on. Seeing Thor's expression, Heimdall knew the other wasn't serious at all, and nodded helplessly. Considering Thor's reckless nature, he decided to send them to an area within Midgard, far from America, during the teleportation. After a moment's thought, Heimdall looked at Thor and said, "Prince, stand together. I will now send you to a place called Korea within Midgard." The six nodded and huddled together. The next moment, a dazzling seven-colored light enveloped them, and they vanished from Asgard in an instant. Chapter 65 Global Announcement. In the early morning at the seaside villa, John, who had woken up naturally, slowly sat up in bed. Opening his eyes, he was surprised to find that the women he had kept up until midnight the previous night were all gone. Where did they go? John activated his super hearing, and could hear the heartbeats and blood flowing in the living room. In a flash, he transformed his venom suit into loose pajamas, put them on, and left the bedroom. Entering the living room, he saw the group gathered in front of the television and asked, "Why are you all gathered here?" The president said last night that he would be giving a national address at 8 o'clock this morning, and everyone should be ready, Betty explained. John nodded knowingly, already guessing what the speech would be about. A spark of interest rose within him, and he glanced at the clock. It was almost time. So he walked to the sofa, and amidst the women's gasps, casually squeezed in among them, one on each side, and waited quietly with them. As it approached 8 o'clock, Betty's face flushed crimson. "The speech is about to start. Stop what you're doing for a moment, don't distract me from the content." John, unconcerned, replied, "It's okay. Since it's distracting you, I can make a call now and ask the whole of America to wait for us. They'll start whenever we're finished." "No." A girl nearby quickly grabbed John's hand as he reached for the phone, her face full of shyness. "Then please continue." Faced with John's shamelessness, the girls had no power to resist. They could only accept John's teasing with flushed faces and then continue watching television. Soon, the time on the television reached 8 o'clock, and all American television channels simultaneously broadcast live footage from inside the White House. On television, Ellis, her eyes serious, focused on the camera and recited her prepared script. "Citizens of the United States of America, I believe you have a general understanding of the problems we are facing from yesterday's announcement. Starting yesterday, all sorts of unknown life forms and objects from other dimensions will appear on Earth. The denser the population, the higher the probability of anomalies, and vice versa. Among these anomalies, a considerable number possess supernatural abilities and are also highly dangerous. Residents, please do not make contact with these anomalies, call the police immediately." In just yesterday alone, tens of thousands of people perished in these anomaly attacks. Ellis spoke, interspersing clips with images of terrifying giant pythons, eerie ghosts, and even, in a fleeting glimpse, a nuclear bomb transported from another dimension detonating on Bikini Bottom. As the interspersed images played, the uncensored scenes of carnage instilled fear in the viewers. "Is all of this real?" Betty looked up at John. "Of course, otherwise where did you think I went for those 2 months?" John laughed. Upon receiving his confirmation, the girls unconsciously tightened their grip on John's arms. On the live stream, Ellis solemnly stated, "But please rest assured, although the future is fraught with danger, we are not without a chance of victory. Yesterday, with the help of Homelander, we prevented at least hundreds of thousands of deaths. Here, I need to thank Homelander on behalf of the people of the world for their selfless help." With that, Ellis stood up and bowed deeply to the camera. "Here we go again," Betty complained, watching the live stream. John asked, puzzled, "What? Here we go again?" Betty retorted, "You haven't been watching TV lately, so you probably instilled too much fear in the president and the others. Every time there's an important occasion, these high-ranking officials give their closing remarks thanking you." A slightly flushed girl nodded in agreement, "And because of this, you've even earned the title of Homelander's benefactor online. Is it really that exaggerated?" Hearing such an absurd story and imagining the scene, John couldn't help but laugh. This was just too funny. On television, the live broadcast continued. After bowing, the president sat back down and calmly said, I would also like to thank the other heroes for their contributions yesterday. Thank you for your hard work. Ho ha ho ha. Seeing the huge difference in the attitude of the two expressions of gratitude, John couldn't help but slap the girl next to him and burst into laughter. At the same time, he thought that if President Ellis were to become a comedian, he would definitely be very successful. Ellis, unaware of all this, continued reciting his speech. Here, to address future crises, nations worldwide will unite to establish a superhero organization. Each officially certified hero, after passing tests, will receive at least $5,000 per month in disaster relief aid. Simultaneously, we will also accept and embrace beings from other dimensions who harbor goodwill towards humanity. For the first 3 months after registration, you will receive $3,000 per month. If you wish, you can also become heroes after passing a strength test. For ordinary citizens, we will make available a body-enhancing serum developed by the military to improve their survival capabilities. Specific details about the hero organization and the serum will not be elaborated upon here. Interested citizens can visit the official website for more information, Ellis said, followed by some information on prevention. Almost simultaneously, countries around the world began giving speeches in their own countries around 8 a.m., with largely the same content. This made everyone worldwide realize that this was no joke, life might truly be fraught with hardship. Immediately, the internet erupted in discussion, with related events becoming the hottest topic. Putting aside the opinions of those people, John's phone, which had been lying around at home for 2 months, rang after the live stream ended. John slowly stopped what he was doing, wiped his slightly damp fingers, and then answered the phone. "Who is it?" "It's me," Stark said on the other end. "Why is our tycoon suddenly in the mood to call me?" John asked. Stark said helplessly, "You haven't been heard from for 2 months, and the White House asked me to ask you if you're interested in becoming the president of this upcoming global superhero organization." "President of the Hero Association?" John thought for a moment and then grinned. "I'm very interested." "Okay, since you've agreed, I'll go back and tell them. By the way, there's a big party tonight, are you interested in coming?" At this point, Stark's tone suddenly became teasing. "In part? Is that really okay? Don't forget I'm still a minor under American law." John suddenly changed the subject. "Remember to send me the address tonight." Chapter 66 Thor. Inside the White House, Rodriguez put down the phone and said to the president, "Stark said Homelander has agreed to become the president of our Hero Association." Because of Rodriguez's outstanding contributions to the Homelander incident, almost everything related to John was handled by him, with President Ellis ultimately reviewing and approving the decision. Hearing that John had agreed to be elected president, everyone in the White House breathed a sigh of relief. Since Homelander has agreed, let's release the news. With him as president, I believe the world will trust his abilities. Now we finally have someone who can keep things under control, Ellis said. Ellis turned to ask, "How's the enhancement serum going?" "Even the most expensive lizard serum sold out within 3 minutes of being released, and our production clearly can't keep up with their need to survive," the Secretary of State said, looking at the superhero website that had been completed weeks ago. On the website's sales page, 1,000 vials of lizard serum were already sold out. Then have the production department ramp up output. And to avoid causing public panic, starting today, all superhero registration and testing will be live streamed. "They love watching this kind of violence," Ellis said. Everyone nodded in understanding and then went their separate ways to handle their respective tasks. Soon, shortly after the nationwide live stream ended, registration points appeared in major American cities. Because this matter was directly related to the lives of the American people, almost as soon as the location of the registration point was confirmed, it was immediately surrounded by densely packed crowds of onlookers. At the same time, occasionally 1 or 2 local heroes or extra-dimensional visitors who felt confident in their abilities would step forward to register amidst the cheers and curiosity of the surrounding crowds. In New York City, New York State, Ghost Spider, dressed in her uniform, stepped forward and asked, "Hello, if I register to become a superhero, can I keep my identity hidden?" "Yes, but you need to register your nickname briefly and receive an electronic card representing your personal information." Looking at the superhero in front of her, who had previously been active in New York City and had risen to the top of the New York superhero rankings after the nemesis became Homelander, the staff member politely said. "Okay, thank you, please give me a registration form." Gwen, dressed in her uniform, nodded. In Miami, Florida, An elderly man with white hair and a beard, dressed in ancient attire, was led to registration point by enthusiastic Chinese-speaking citizens. He then successfully communicated normally with people through Jarvis's real-time translation. That night, in Seoul, the capital of South Korea, a pillar of light with dazzling colors descended from the sky. Because Thor wasn't exiled as in the original story, Hyeoldam chose to place him in downtown Seoul. Amidst the citizens' gasps of surprise, they watched as 6 men and women dressed in what appeared to be medieval European armor appeared after the pillar of light disappeared, with a ring of ancient and mysterious, ornate patterns at their feet. A South Korean citizen looked at Thor descending from the sky, then looked down at his phone at the president's emphasized message: "Various anomalies are occurring around the world. Please report any such occurrences to the police immediately and be extremely careful." The next moment, a cacophony of screams erupted from the crowd in the square, as everyone fled in the opposite direction from where Thor was, as if they had seen a ghost. "What a bunch of country bumpkins, afraid of our presence," Thor said arrogantly. Minutes later, Seoul police arrived, pointing their guns at Thor. One officer, realizing the man didn't speak Korean, approached and asked in English, "Interdimensional beings, welcome to Earth. I know you're confused because you've wandered here by mistake. We'll answer your questions. Please tell me your names. I am Thor, not some interdimensional being. I'm here to help you quell the chaos in Midgard," Thor shouted to the officer. Thor, a flicker of surprise crossed the officer's eyes. It seemed that the mythical figure actually existed in the other world. "I understand, Thor, right? Don't worry, I know you're new to this world and have many questions. A little misunderstanding is normal. Please fill out this form. If everything is okay, you can consider joining the Hero Association." Seeing the officer's friendly attitude, the officer told his companion to lower his gun and then handed over several forms written in English. Seeing that the officer didn't even seem to recognize him, he wanted to argue, but Loki stopped him, giving the others a wink before he took the form. After glancing at it, Loki probed, "By the way, what's this Hero Association you mentioned?" "It's an organization established to deal with those evil and destructive extradimensional beings. The heroes there receive a large monthly allowance," the officer replied. "Heroes? I remember there's a guy here called Homelander, right? I want to fight him," Thor exclaimed excitedly. In Asgard, Hyeoldam, witnessing the scene, slapped his forehead in exasperation. The officer glanced at Thor with surprise, wondering how he knew Homelander so soon after arriving. He reassured him, "After you fill out the forms, take a strength test. If you're really good, you'll have a chance to meet him in America. Did you hear that? I'm going to have a go at him and see who's the #1 warrior in the 9 realms." Thor excitedly waved his hammer at his companions. Meanwhile, in America, which is 13 hours ahead of South Korea, John had finished off 40,000 people. After casually picking out a few innocent victims, Rodriguez asked, "Mr. John, do you have time in a week?" "What is it?" John, who was about to leave, stopped and asked. "In a week, we're planning a large-scale superhero gathering across America. Heroes from all over the country will be there. As the president of the Hero Association, we'd like to invite you to give a speech so they can learn from your spirit." "Learn from your spirit? Let them also storm the White House?" John teased, scaring Rodriguez into silence, his head bowed low. Seeing the other person's attitude, John waved his hand dismissively and said, "All right, send me the time and place, I'll come check it out." "Thank you so much for taking the time to come." Rodriguez breathed a sigh of relief, only to find John had already disappeared. He thought to himself that he had survived another day under John's thumb. Sorry, I had a few things to do during the club's recruitment today, so I'm a little late." Chapter 67 Crimson Flash. Inside the White House, Rodriguez, fresh from prison, returned with a worried expression. Upon seeing the vice president, Ellis immediately asked anxiously, "How did it go? Did Homelander agree?" "Ellis, perhaps we were all wrong," Rodriguez said, not answering the question, but instead stating, "I think proposing John as the president of the Hero Association was a huge mistake." "What do you mean?" Everyone present was taken aback. "I initially thought that Homelander's anger subsided after killing Ross, and even if he couldn't return to his former benevolent self, he wouldn't be as brutal as before." Rodriguez sighed. "Afterwards, he did indeed behave himself for a while, as we expected. But in our recent encounter, I discovered that his nature hasn't changed at all. He's even more indifferent to the lives of others." We can tolerate such a powerful villain, but the Hero Association members might not accept it. Among those heroes, a considerable number are devoted to justice. If they discover Homelander's true colors, what do you think they will do? Rodriguez stared intently at Ellis. Ellis, somewhat nervously guessing, protest? Take action? Or expose Homelander's true nature to the public? And how will Homelander retaliate? We, or rather all the countries on Earth, have painstakingly united to tell this colossal lie to the people, making them think Homelander is a kind and good person. If the lie is eventually exposed, do you think the American people can withstand his wrath? Rodriguez shook his head. I don't want the first thing that happens after the Hero Association is established, a collaboration ultimately aimed at overthrowing their leader. As he spoke, everyone present broke out in a cold sweat, finding his words remarkably reasonable. Then should I relinquish Homelander's title as president of the Hero Association? Ellis suggested, but then shook his head again. No, no, if Homelander feels he's been tricked, the White House will be torn down again. For a moment, everyone present felt trapped, wishing they could slap themselves for having previously suggested Homelander's election as president of the Hero Association. Ring ring. Just as everyone in the White House was collectively regretting their actions, Rodriguez's phone rang. He picked it up and saw it was John Kent, the person they had just been discussing. Homelander didn't hear what we were saying, did he? Instantly, cold sweat soaked his back, his heart began to pound, and his pupils dilated rapidly. Rodriguez gently pressed down with his right hand to quiet the others, then answered the phone. Vice President, your heart is beating a little fast. You're not talking badly about me behind my back, are you? John joked on the other end of the line. Then he heard the other person's heartbeat gradually calm down. Good, Homelander doesn't know what happened just now. Rodriguez breathed a sigh of relief, then smiled and said, I did a little exercise just now, so my heart is a little racing. May I ask what Homelander needs me for? Nothing much, just need you to bring a team to the alley behind the store at 66 Central Park West Avenue in Times Square. I'm going to kill someone here in a bit. Remember to come and help me clean up the floor, John said calmly. Who are you going to kill? Invisible Gavin. His abilities are getting on my nerves. Okay, he's almost here. Remember to hurry. John watched the figure about to pass through the alley, hung up the phone, and ran straight to his destination. After the call ended, the people in the White House exchanged glances. Rodriguez shrugged, indicating that he was right. He hadn't even become the president yet, and this was already happening. Rewind half an hour. New York, Times Square, a world-famous landmark in the United States. In this famous district where every inch of land is precious and prosperous, an area with 2 stadiums is currently being requisitioned by the government to be used as a testing ground for superheroes. As early as yesterday, tickets for spectators sold out instantly. Everyone wanted to see the superhero's performance and cast their vote for the one they thought was worthy of being president. Yes, although John had already decided on the position of president of the Hero Association, according to procedure, the position of president of the Hero Association needs to be elected by democratic vote. However, democracy is a complex system. Those who understand, understand. With voting conducted anonymously but the total votes for each hero not publicly disclosed, manipulation behind the scenes is still possible as long as the results aren't too outrageous. Under the expectant gazes of the audience, a flash of crimson light appeared, and the first to enter the venue was a figure clad in a crimson robe, dressed like the Flash. The commentator, under the watchful eyes of the viewers both inside and outside the live stream, raised his right hand and shouted, Now, let me solemnly introduce to you today's first test subject, Crimson Flash, who has come from another dimension. After a brief silence, thunderous cheers erupted. After a while, when the audience quieted down slightly, the commentator said, according to his personal information, his top speed can reach more than 50 times the speed of sound. If everything is true, he might be the fastest person in the entire world. Now, let him demonstrate his abilities. With a wave of the referee's hand, Crimson Flash was already ready on the track. As the referee prepared to blow the whistle, Red Flash inwardly grumbled, My God, I'm going to waste time waiting like this again. It's so slow. Just as the commentator had said, his ability was super speed, allowing him to traverse almost any city on Earth in seconds and reach any location within the planet in hours. However, this ability also had a side effect. Like his super speed, his super reflexes couldn't be actively turned off. Therefore, Even the shortest conversation felt like hours to him with his super reflexes, a form of agonizing torture. While he was daydreaming about killing time, he suddenly noticed a figure flying towards him in the distant sky at a speed slightly slower than his own. That looks like Homelander? I didn't expect him to be this fast. Red Flash used his super reflexes to peer at the distant figure. In his eyes, Homelander's movement speed was finally like a normal person's, at least not like the referee beside him, who had to wait half an hour just to blow a whistle. So, to onlookers, in that instant, Akabane was waving upwards, trying to attract attention during this ever-lengthening period of time. Chapter 68 Passively taking the spotlight. Above Times Square, John's figure was rapidly descending. Having heard there was a performance to watch, he rushed back from Washington after slaughtering 40,000 people. While he didn't want to be a performer, needlessly showcasing his abilities, he was still interested in watching others perform. During his descent, John sensed something amiss below and immediately activated his super reaction. He then saw a red figure waving at him in a frozen scene below. Is this a cosplay of the Flash? John wondered, then accelerated his descent, quickly reaching the stadium. The entire stadium fell silent. The dripping water and the shouts of the audience seemed to freeze. In this scene, a red figure left the track and approached John at a normal pace. Red Flash waved at John. You must be Homelander. I heard you have Superman's abilities from DC Comics, so you should be able to hear me now. What's up? You're probably testing your abilities right now, John said, pointing to the distant track. Before speaking, he activated his biofield to envelop the two of them, preventing the supersonic air he exhaled from shattering the ground and randomly killing spectators in the first few rows of the stands. It's alright, there's still plenty of time before the referee starts blowing the whistle and the super-fast cameras begin filming, Red Flash waved dismissively. He had arrived in this world 2 days ago, and because of this super reaction, he understood his current situation in just a few minutes. Following his original profession from his previous world, he registered as a superhero that same day. To be honest, I'm very envious of you. After all, you're not like me, stuck in a painful stagnation. Red Flash sighed. Only superhumans like you can have a normal conversation with me. You remind me of a hero in the world, called All-Around Man, who also possessed all-around strength like you. However, your strength still shocks me. I saw your fight with Abomination. In just 6 months, your strength has improved so much? Red Flash talked on and on, finally finding someone who could keep up with his pace. He immediately became a chatterbox, talking incessantly. Alright, don't you think you're talking too much? John waved his hand impatiently, then ignored him and walked towards the audience. After reaching the audience, he found a quiet corner to sit down. Then, with a thought, his battlesuit gradually transformed into an ordinary hooded shirt under the watchful eyes of super reaction. Boring, this personality is too cold. Watching John leave, Red Flash complained. It's fair to say his information gathering wasn't comprehensive enough, otherwise, if he had chosen to take a stroll through the White House, he would have discovered John's true colors. John sat in the stands, deliberately shutting down his super reflexes to avoid falling into the same predicament as Red Flash. In his normal state, he always used his 5 senses, slightly better than the average person, to perceive things. When looking at scenery, he only focused on the macroscopic beauty, not using his X-ray vision to examine the skeleton of others, or his microscopic abilities to see the flaws and imperfections of what ordinary people consider stunning beauties. When eating, he consciously relaxed his body, allowing his taste buds to be stimulated by various foods, unlike the god tongue in some anime, where one could like trace amounts of pesticide residue from an apple or sense the breath of the person in front of them. When learning from teachers like Betty, he maintained the same level of muscle elasticity as an ordinary person, able to sink in normally under slight pressure, otherwise, he wouldn't feel anything during deeper conversations. He tried to appear normal in his breathing, thinking, and speaking. Doing that with Red Flash would be too painful. Without the ability to eat, see, sleep, and rage normally, living is an endless torment. On the scene, as John deactivated his super reaction, time resumed its normal flow from his perspective. In a mere instant, the referee blew the whistle, and then a super high-speed camera capable of capturing 6.1 million images per second activated. Within a second, a crimson afterimage flashed continuously across the inner circle of the 400-meter track. Soon, with the authorization granted by Stark, Jarvis immediately sent the speed analysis of the footage to the scene. Looking at the report, the commentator exclaimed, "My God, just now, Red Flash ran a full 41 laps around the entire track in 1 second. Wow! Red Flash! Red Flash! Red Flash!" The moment the result was announced, a huge cheer and shout erupted. The entire stadium was chanting his name. Red Flash opened his arms to accept the cheers from the crowd, then took the microphone from the referee and thanked everyone, saying, "I am Red Flash. Thank you all for your support. Next, there are tests for maximum load-bearing capacity, destructive power, and other aspects. Please cheer me on." Also, Red Flash paused, looking towards the audience. Just now, there was another super famous hero that everyone knows mixed in with the crowd. Can you guess who it is? That guy. John was a little annoyed by the mischievous smile on the other's face, but before the audience could look around, he soared into the air, transformed back into his battle suit form, and landed on the stage. Once on stage, he immediately and without hesitation punched Red Flash in the stomach at super speed, sending him flying dozens of meters. Then, Red Flash ran back at lightning speed. Because it happened so fast, and because he was in the wrong, Red Flash didn't make a sound. So no one knew what happened. Everyone only saw that after John flew onto the stage, Red Flash's face immediately turned somewhat ugly. However, no one cared about Red Flash's ordeal anymore, because after John appeared, he had become the focus of the entire arena, receiving cheers from the crowd. "Ah, Homelander, I love you. He's looking at me. Homelander is watching me. OMG, I actually saw Homelander. This ticket was totally worth it." In an instant, a wave of cheers several levels louder than before engulfed everything, naturally attracting the attention of the superheroes undergoing the test. For a moment, these people looked at John with curiosity, envy, disdain, and jealousy. John gently took the microphone from the grim-faced Red Flash, waved to the crowd, and didn't say a word, but the audience, in a state of extreme excitement, was almost going crazy with excitement. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69. You Are My Heroes. Homelander. 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 Homelander, I'll always love you. Hero of the Homeland. Hero of the Homeland. As John appeared, the entire stadium erupted in cheers. Even the commentator, his face flushed with excitement, pulled a notebook from his pocket and, amidst the deafening roar, stammered, "Homelander, I'm your biggest fan. Can you sign this for me?" John smiled and took the notebook. Then, a burning light shone in his eyes, a thin red beam emanating from his right eye. A burnt smell wafted from the notebook, and on its cover appeared the words John Kent, in stylized English lettering. Handing the notebook back to the commentator, who was practically going crazy with excitement, John turned around and saw that the fans had moved beyond their cheers, leaping over the platform and scaling the barricades at the front of the stadium, rushing towards him. This scene was practically a zombie apocalypse scenario. John, holding a microphone, floated slowly in midair and said, "Please calm down, everyone. I've received your good intentions." Seeing everyone still frantically cheering and shouting as they rushed towards them, John reluctantly activated his super reaction. The next moment, all the fans froze in place, their outstretched legs stuck in midair. "This is the trouble you caused." John turned to look at Red Flash, who was already several meters away from him. Who knew they'd go crazy like this, haha. After John's punch, the guy seemed a little scared and chuckled dryly. "So now, you should immediately use your super speed to move them all back to their original positions." John pointed to the crowd below. "Move? You mean I have to do all these tens of thousands of things?" Seeing that John didn't reply, Red Flash could only nod helplessly and said, Okay, I'll move them." With that, Red Flash reluctantly lifted a man and walked towards a seat in the stands during the frozen moment. Then he saw that Homelander wasn't entirely idle. He also started moving people, but unlike him, he only moved the women who looked good. Faced with Red Flash's speechless gaze, John calmly said, "Do you expect me to touch these girls? Go do your job. So you can touch them, huh?" Red Flash thought to himself, but still obediently became a laborer. In the blink of an eye, all the frenzied audience members found themselves back in their seats, as if time had reversed. Fans, please calm down. I don't want to move tens of thousands of you back to your seats again, John said with a smile. What do you mean you moved them? You only touched a few dozen people, and they were all beautiful women. Red Flash wanted to curse. But the onlookers didn't know any of this. They only knew that just now, Homelander had carried them back to their seats one by one, and they had actually had physical contact with him. In their excitement, more than a dozen people fainted on the spot. Meanwhile, the viewers in the live stream were filled with regret, having missed a chance to get up close and personal with Homelander. The other contestants who came to test their superhero skills all paled. Most of them hadn't even seen what happened. Only a few with decent skills managed to catch a glimpse of the two after images crisscrossing the arena. However, this commotion did indeed keep the fans in their seats, and John picked up the microphone to speak. Please don't get excited. As my fans, you probably know my background. I suffered the same fate as Batman. John said slowly, holding the microphone. Because of my childhood experiences, my heart has always been very fragile. I always remember the last words my parents said before they died, and it is thanks to your support that I am who I am today. Looking at the fans in the audience who were moved to tears by their sympathy for their idols past, John raised his hands, forcing a bright smile, and said, without you, I wouldn't be who I am today. I always remember everyone who helped, trusted, or even hurt me. Each and every one of you is my hero. And heroes, as long as you stay true to yourselves, I will always be with you, John said into the microphone, followed by another thunderous cheer and applause from the audience. Unfortunately, I am not the main character here. We should give more time to the other superheroes present. They are the future of the world. Next, please welcome Red Flash and the other heroes to continue the test. John said, handing the microphone back to the referee, then slowly flew up and sat on the stage under the gaze of the entire audience, raising his hand to signal that the test could continue. But clearly, with Homelander present, no one was in the mood to continue watching the performances of those third-rate heroes. Neither Red Flash nor the subsequent superheroes received much attention from the audience. Everyone was frantically snapping photos of John sitting on the stage. Shit, he's stealing the show? A complaint suddenly erupted from a hidden corner. Just wait, I'll draw everyone's attention. What good is fighting ability? Having a special ability is what really matters. Soon, after another 10 minutes or so of testing, the commentator introduced the next ability user. Next up is Gavin, the invisible man from another dimension. As his title suggests, his ability is invisibility. A figure slowly emerged from the stands, a tall, thin, blonde-haired man with a black ring on his right middle finger. He waved to everyone, but received little response. Gavin wasn't bothered at all, simply participating in the next test. His performance was mediocre, his strength was a few tons, and his speed was tens of meters per second, barely meeting the admission requirements. Without his special ability, he might not even have been able to participate in the test. Since the official lizard serum has begun to be sold to the public, these performances are basically the normal strength after being injected with a lizard serum, and more people will definitely reach this level in the future. As for the Hero Association's hero ranking system, it was established through global discussion and is divided into 5 levels. Simply put, this means that the strongest single attack, when charged, can destroy bricks, walls, houses, buildings, or streets. For example, John is a level 5 hero, and if new superheroes emerge, the level can be increased. Someone like Gavin, however, only performs at level 2. Level 1 heroes are support-type specially recruited heroes with special abilities but relatively low inherent strength. Chapter 70 Pure Love Warrior Homelander. In Times Square, New York, at the testing grounds, Invisible Man Gavin officially earned the title of second-class hero. The commentator then handed him the microphone, letting him say a few words. Holding the microphone, Gavin smiled at the lukewarm reception from the audience and said, "Ladies and gentlemen of New York, besides my invisibility, I have another ability I haven't shown yet. That is, besides making my body invisible, if I want, my eyes can see through any object." This immediately drew everyone's attention, and some women instinctively tightened their clothing. John in the stands also looked over. "You mean, you can see through people's bodies?" the commentator asked curiously. Invisible Man nodded smugly. "Of course, for example, I can see that you're wearing red underwear today." "Wow, that's accurate." The commentator instinctively covered his crotch. "Yes, besides wanting to be a superhero, I've also been quite a famous painter thanks to this ability, Gavin boasted proudly, while the men in the audience gave knowing smiles. Some women wore expressions of disgust. The combination of invisibility and X-ray vision was too lewd. The thought of being spied on made them feel nauseous. "Hey, Invisible Man, look at Homelander," someone shouted from the crowd, and the audience erupted in cheers. John, in the stands, remained with his legs crossed, showing no emotion whatsoever, only a thought that if the guy below dared to turn around and disgust him with those eyes, well. Gavin, though somewhat arrogant, wasn't suicidal. Although he had seen it countless times in private, he didn't dare turn around in front of the entire audience. He simply shook his head and refused, saying, "Homelander is my beloved hero. Please understand, I will never use this ability on him." Upon being refused, a chorus of boos erupted from the crowd. Gavin's face revealed a smug smile. He didn't want to be confined to the subsidies he'd get as a damn superhero. He just needed to make a name for himself. With his sketching skills, he'd have a ton of wealthy men curious about the real figures of female celebrities and superheroes coming to him. Although he'd only arrived in this world yesterday and hadn't seen so many people yet, there was a superhero party in America in a week. Even if he wasn't invited, he could just blend in unnoticed. As Gavin was lost in thought about his future income, he didn't see Homelander's meaningful gaze behind him. Interesting abilities, John chuckled. The superhero performances that followed were all the same: telekinesis, fire-making, ice-making, super strength, and all sorts of other abilities. However, their overall strength was only mediocre, the highest level wasn't even level 4, and they didn't cause much of a stir. Gavin watched for a short while before disappearing from the stadium. 7 minutes after he left, Homelander smiled, waved to everyone, and also vanished from the testing area. In the New York sky, John pulled out his phone and dialed Rodriguez's number, ordering him to bring a team to collect a body. Without hesitation, he swooped down. Below, the Invisible Man, his body becoming transparent, ran alone through an alley. The next moment, a figure plummeted from the sky, crashing to the ground and cracking the earth beneath his feet. Wang Difa, UT. Homelander? Gavin was about to curse, but upon seeing the black-robed figure before him, he immediately stopped. "Yes, it's me." John stared at the empty air before him, smiling. "I was a little curious about your abilities back then." Although the other could become invisible, the collision with the air, the breath from his mouth and nose, the slightly elevated body temperature, and the beating heart were all clearly visible to John. "Oh." The Invisible Man revealed himself, a knowing smile immediately spreading across his face. "You want to borrow my power?" "That's true." John chuckled, as if looking at a clown. "I have a question, can you answer it?" "Of course, no problem, I'll answer any question." The Invisible Man nodded without hesitation. John looked a little shy. "Well, if I want pictures of those female superheroes, can you draw them right now?" The Invisible Man hesitated. "I only arrived in this world yesterday, I haven't had a chance to see them yet, I might have to wait a few days to gather some material." The Invisible Man then immediately said, "But if you want portraits of the female superheroes from my original world, I can draw them for you when I get home, they have amazing figures." "Oh, no? That's alright, but I need to borrow your power now." "No problem, who do you want me to become invisible to see?" "I promise." Gavin said excitedly, but the next moment his vision went completely black, and he couldn't see anything. "What's going on?" Everything happened so fast that he initially thought the blackout was due to low blood sugar, but the next moment, immense pain shot through his eyes, causing him to scream in agony. Gavin knelt on the ground, clutching his eyes and wailing. John examined the two perfectly detached eyeballs in his hand, then crouched down to look at Gavin. "Thanks. I need to borrow these two eyeballs that store your X-ray vision," John said, gently holding the two eyeballs to Gavin's ear with his right hand, then applying slight pressure. PFFT. Even while still screaming, Gavin clearly heard the sound, like a water balloon bursting. "Used, here you go." But the item's durability seems to have reached 0. "You can repair it, right?" John released his grip, letting the items fall naturally. "What the hell are you trying to do? Motherfucker, fuck you." A torrent of profanities erupted from Gavin's mouth, and John listened with a smile as the man hurled his curses in pain. "You should be glad you haven't done anything yet, or it wouldn't be as simple as just dying," John said, the red light in his eyes growing brighter, But just before he was about to strike, Gavin's figure suddenly vanished completely. The red light pierced through the spot where Gavin had been standing, instantly piercing through the ground dozens of meters below. John's brow furrowed instantly, because unlike his previous invisibility, this time he had truly disappeared completely. His heartbeat couldn't be heard within a 10-kilometer radius. Fun fact, although John might be a master of bullying others, deep down he's a pure-hearted warrior. Chapter 71 The Anti-Homelanders Alliance. In the alley, John used his supervision to scan the entire city of New York in seconds. He couldn't find Gavin anywhere. Teleportation? John frowned. And over such a large area? He thought, then instantly took flight, deciding to check out the surrounding cities. At the same time, he was filled with astonishment. This guy's special teleportation ability was too outrageous. Just 5 seconds after John left, a disheveled figure suddenly appeared, collapsing in the alley. Damn it, Homelander, I'll get my revenge on you. I'll kill your whole family. I'll expose your ugly face to the whole world. Gavin, blind except for 2 black eye sockets, clenched his fists. Then, with a flash, he appeared 10 meters away in the sky, followed by a series of flashes as he continued to disappear into the distance. 2 minutes later, John, having explored several nearby cities, reappeared. Looking at the filthy ground before him, the amount of blood was indeed slightly higher than before, and the faint smell of blood in the air began to spread far and wide. 3 seconds later, John, who had followed the trail to this spot, stared speechlessly at the small river before him. The last trace of blood had appeared here, and then there was no more. Consider yourself lucky. Hopefully, you won't be unlucky enough to run into me next time, John said calmly into his phone, pulling it out and dialing Rodriguez's number. I messed up. I didn't kill the guy. Just send the team to the alley to clean up the bloodstains, John said calmly into the phone. Before the stunned vice president could speak, John hung up and left the riverbank. 5 seconds later, Gavin's figure reappeared in the water, then disappeared again, flickering in and out until nightfall. This ability to flicker came from a ring he always wore on his right hand, a spatial ring with 5 cubic meters of space inside, capable of storing anything, including life. Furthermore, one could use the space within the ring to teleport to the real world, the maximum distance being a diagonal distance of those 5 cubic meters. However, this ring has a drawback. Any creature can only stay inside for a maximum of 30 seconds before being forcibly ejected. This is why Gavin doesn't linger in the space. Because John's detection speed is so fast, acting immediately upon thinking, even with his super reaction ability, he always manages to miss his targets. If John's execution speed were weaker, Gavin might have awkwardly appeared before him in the alley. Late at night, taking advantage of the sparse pedestrian traffic, Gavin groped his way back to his temporary residence, an apartment building initially provided by the government to house these extra-dimensional heroes. They could move out later if they had the money. As soon as he opened the door, all the other superheroes temporarily living with him stared in horror at the eyeless figure before them. "You're Gavin?" the other superheroes asked, astonished. "Yes, it was me." Gavin, his face covered in blood, grabbed a companion's hand and pleaded, "Homelander blinded me. I'm completely incapacitated now, and I can only ask you for help." "What? You're saying Homelander did this to you?" Hearing this, his classmates, who were about to call an ambulance, froze on the spot. Yes, it was him. He's not as upright as the media portrays him at all. He gouged out my eyes as soon as we met, Gavin said, though he actually crushed them. So I can only ask you for help. Please expose his true colors for me, Gavin pleaded, but the room full of superheroes immediately fell silent. Only 1 or 2 superheroes with a sense of justice immediately nodded in agreement. After half an hour of discussion, 5 people with an overflowing sense of justice were willing to help Gavin. The remaining superheroes discussed it after the others left and decided that even if they didn't help, they would still keep his secret. After all, who knew what had triggered Homelander's murderous intent in Gavin? What if they got dragged into it? Plus, they were concerned about their companions' opinions, so they all pretended nothing had happened. In a secluded cabin, several superheroes helped Gavin bandage his eyes. One of them asked, "What should we do next with Homelander?" "It's simple. We just need to get dirt on Homelander and expose him at the superhero gathering a week later," Gavin said angrily in the darkness. "But wouldn't that be like confronting Homelander directly? What if he kills us?" Someone hesitated. Gavin reassured them, "Don't worry, Everyone there will be superheroes. Homelander isn't invincible, is he? Whether it's Red Flash, the fastest today, or the Straw Hat Pirates from the next state, they can all rival him in strength. Everyone will be at the gathering a week later. Okay. The group exchanged glances and agreed, but they had no idea what Gavin was thinking. In fact, Gavin knew better than anyone the risks of confronting Homelander at the superhero gathering, but he was already disregarding them. Blind as he was a cripple. Since that was the case, they might as well use their own lives and the lives of these idiots to smear Homelander. As for whether these guys would die, so be it. So, what should we do next to get rid on Homelander? A somewhat obese man asked. It's simple. Since Homelander hasn't been exposed, it means the government is definitely involved. Just a trip to the White House will definitely yield results, Gavin suggested. But none of us are good at infiltration, and Gavin is blind. The group hesitated. At this moment, a tall, thin young man said, "How about this? We'll attach a camera to Gavin's head, and then remotely tell him the direction to walk through an earpiece. That way, his invisibility ability will definitely come in handy." That works. After discussing it, the group immediately made up their minds and decided to infiltrate the White House to use Gavin to film the politicians protecting Homelander. Late at night, at a seaside villa, John, having finished his pre-sleep exercise, called out the progress bar, 72%. It seems that using the Ancient One's abilities these past few days to strike high-quality criminals from a distance has greatly accelerated my progress. This should allow me to fully recharge my energy bar before the gathering, John muttered to himself. He figured he'd be about 100 times stronger than he is now. Honestly, the constant stream of newcomers had made him feel a bit pressured, and he was worried he wouldn't be able to control his power. Chapter 72 The Living Ancestor. 5 years ago, in Manhattan's XC district of New York City, a well-dressed but weary-looking middle-aged couple walked hand-in-hand with a handsome 13-year-old boy. After navigating a winding street, they arrived at a nicely decorated building and gently rang the doorbell. A short while later, a bearded man opened the door, nodded slightly in greeting to the couple and child, and then let them in. Once inside, the couple left the boy alone in the living room while they went into the bedroom to talk. Half an hour later, they finished their conversation. The couple knelt before the boy, their eyes filled with exhaustion, and said, "John, Mom and Dad have some things to take care of lately, so would it be alright if you stayed at our house for a few days?" "You mean the company is about to go bankrupt?" John's eyes widened as he tried to appear dignified. "You've been staying up all night dealing with this, haven't you?" A flicker of surprise crossed their eyes, for they had never discussed company matters in front of their child before. "Come on, Mom and Dad, I'm not blind. I've seen how you've been these past few days. Anyway, the company's market value isn't even 10 million. Bankruptcy is no big deal. You've raised me for over 10 years, so I'll support you for the rest of your lives." John patted his chest and assured them, "Your son is a genius. I'll stay here for the next few days, and after you've dealt with the company, I'll teach you how to make money." HMPH. John put his hands in his pockets and said confidently, "Before, I didn't work hard because I was a rich kid, but now it seems I need to come back." Hearing John's childish voice, the couple were amused. His mother, Shaw Mary, smiled and pinched John's fair cheek, saying, all right, then let's watch our genius son make money for us. How many times have I told you, don't touch me?" John covered his slightly red cheek and took a step back, saying speechlessly, "What you should do now is sleep, then properly resolve the company's problems, leave with nothing, and then leave everything to me." As the couple left, John turned obediently to the bearded man beside him and smiled, "You must be Uncle Morgan. My dad has been mentioning you. We might need to stay here for a few days. Do you have a computer?" Uncle Morgan looked at the overly familiar boy in front of him silently for a moment, then nodded and pointed to the room in the corner. "Thank you. By the way, Uncle Morgan, it's almost evening now. When should we eat?" John asked, turning back. Morgan paused for a moment, then turned and said, "I'll go out and buy some now." Late at night, John sat up in bed. Was I still half asleep? Why did I dream about things from my childhood? Under the bright moonlight, he covered his head and fell into deep thought. Could it be because I mentioned them at the testing center? He still clearly remembered everything that happened afterward. After moving into Uncle Morgan's house, he searched for ways to make money on the computer, while outside, his parents' company was doing increasingly poorly. During their phone call, young John, despite his best efforts to comfort them and assure them that he could provide a good life for them, could clearly sense the growing anxiety and agitation on the other end of the line. Ultimately, his parents' company went bankrupt. In their last phone call, their final words to him were, "Live on, John." Filled with unease, he had Morgan take him to the company building. There, they heard two screams rapidly approaching from above. By the time he realized what was happening, two pools of bloody, mangled flesh lay before him. "Honestly, what disappointed me most was that they didn't take me with them when they left." John, resting his head on his hand, looked at the moon. "Now that I think about it, maybe they were too lonely down there and wanted me to live and bring more people down to keep them company." Inside the White House, the invisible Gavin directed the way step by step deeper into the White House. Through his earpiece, his teammates guided him through the camera, providing step-by-step instructions. Finally, after some searching, he successfully planted a bugging device in a corner of the presidential office, and then went to the archives to look up information. On the helicarrier, Nick Fury tossed a document to Banner, saying, "Here, this is your perk." "What?" Banner looked at the document in his hand, puzzled. It showed that he had been accepted as a level 3 hero by the Hero Association. "But I haven't taken the test yet?" Banner looked at the director in confusion. Nick Fury shook his head and said, "It's okay. The organization has a backup of your abilities. After you're officially registered with a Hero Association, with your current level, you can receive a stipend of about $15,000 per month." "Do I need to do missions? Like fighting those guys from other dimensions?" Banner asked. "Of course, I'll occasionally go on field missions around here, but Homelander has already taken care of all the enemies above level 3 globally. With your strength, dealing with those level 2 enemies is more than enough. You can rest assured about taking this 15,000. "Oh, thank you. By the way." Nick Fury thought of something and turned to Banner, saying, "In a few days, there's a nationwide superhero gathering. All the heroes above level 3 will be there. Remember to go." "What about Homelander?" "To be honest, I'm a bit of a fan of his." Banner asked expectantly. "Oh." Nick Fury hesitated for a moment, thinking about how Homelander had been secretly cheated on, before answering, "He'll be there too, but you'd better not get too close to him. His personality isn't as good as the news portrays him." "Is he acting too?" Banner asked, somewhat disappointed. Meanwhile, inside the White House, the Invisible Man, having gathered enough information from the database, walked straight into the Oval Office. Gavin crouched in a dark corner, preparing to stay there permanently. He planned to stay until the day before the gathering began. In the coming days, all the discussions about John within the White House will be thoroughly exposed to the public. Even the information gathered in the database is enough to shock the anti-Homelanders alliance. Even with prior preparation, the attacks on the White House, the destruction of the Statue of Liberty, the mass killing of criminals, these are acts of 21st century terrorism. Even non-terrorists wouldn't dare act so recklessly on America's head. He's practically a living ancestor worshipped by America. Remember what his parents said at the end, "It'll be on the test later." As for Gavin? Just Skeleton King, a tool I needed to find an excuse for the protagonist to directly confront the Hero Association. Chapter 73 Gathering of Heroes. A week later, on a night when almost every resident of the United States had finished a day's work, they all chose to return home and turn on their televisions. That very night, a government-sponsored gathering of national heroes was being held in New York City. The government had been publicizing this news for a week, promising a live broadcast of the entire event, with heroes from all over New York City and all heroes of level 3 or higher from across the country in attendance. Gwen, dressed in her Spider-Man suit, floated through the air, then nimbly flipped to the entrance of the gathering. She casually flashed the identification bracelet on her arm, and after a simple scan, was respectfully invited inside. Upon entering, Gwen saw several towering soldiers, each over 4 meters tall with yellowish skin, lurking in a corner. Each of them exuded a strong sense of threat. "It's unbelievable that the gatekeepers are official Abomination soldiers, comparable to level 3 heroes," Gwen remarked. These Abomination soldiers were created by fusing Abomination genes with various enhancement serums. Because the side effects of the altered appearance hadn't been eliminated, and due to certain risks, the government hadn't directly made them available to the public. Only volunteers within the military can receive the injection, and its combat effectiveness is far superior to any lizard serum circulating among the public. Inside the lavishly decorated party venue, Gwen spotted countless superheroes and prominent figures from both the American political and military circles who had appeared on television numerous times. Delicious. Delicious. In the distance, a red-clad boy wearing a straw hat excitedly shouted in Japanese, wielding a knife and fork, before devouring the food in front of him. That Straw Hat Boy, isn't it? Gwen watched the commotion curiously. A dozen or so onlookers had gathered around the boy, occasionally letting out gasps of surprise. This was partly due to the Straw Hat Boy's superhuman appetite, and partly because the boy was a level 5 ability user whose destructive power was comparable to Homelander's. Turning her gaze to another corner, Gwen saw dozens of identical-looking individuals dressed in red uniforms, cosplaying as the Flash, conversing amongst themselves. This was none other than Red Flash, the level 5 hero who participated in the hero test that day. In terms of speed, even Homelander, according to official data, was inferior to him. At this moment, Red Flash was rapidly splitting into dozens of clones, constantly conversing with different people, a display of breathtaking speed. In front of the president, a man was chatting happily with him, and Gwen easily recognized him, Sebastian Shaw, the Black King. It was said that before coming to this world, his original world was fighting World War II, and his ability was to absorb all forms of energy and directly convert them into his own energy, and release the energy back with almost no loss. The ability was simple and brutal, but extremely destructive, making him a level 5 hero as well. To date, there are only 5 or 6 level 5 heroes in the entire United States, and she identified 3 of them with just a glance, which made one acknowledge the high caliber of this all-American hero gathering. There were also hundreds of other heroes below level 5, most of whom were level 3 or 4 heroes who had come from other cities, scattered throughout the gathering. Most importantly, there was still more than an hour before the gathering was scheduled to begin. The gathering hadn't even officially started, yet so many superheroes were already there. Simultaneously, everything was being streamed live, with a chat buzzing with discussions about each hero's resume and achievements. Viewers had differing opinions on the hero's caliber, some thinking it was too high, others too low, and they began ranking them based on their combat performance. Those who enjoyed discussing achievements in fictional works were even more excited upon seeing real heroes, wishing they could have them fight each other right then and there to determine who was number 1. As for Homelander, although his online fanbase still far surpassed others, many believe he was and currently ranked number 1 in terms of combat power, given the performances of over 20 level 5 superheroes worldwide. The White House president shared this sentiment. After talking with Shaw and observing the large number of heroes present, with the possibility of even more powerful characters emerging in the future, he began to waver in his decision to allow Homelander to act with impunity in America. He was considering whether to secretly hold an exorcism event to eliminate this destabilizing factor. But the thought of Homelander's terrifying power made him back down. He decided to reconsider. Being a lackey didn't seem so bad so far. Homelander's here. Someone shouted, and most people turned to look at the door. Homelander was walking in, chatting and laughing with Iron Man, a level 4 hero. The whole process was incredibly smooth. No one stopped him or asked for his wristband to be scanned. He was allowed free passage. Seeing Homelander enter, Gwen's expression behind her mask became complicated. After a moment's hesitation, she said nothing more. "I'm going to chat with those pretty girls. You go have fun by yourself," Tony said excitedly, then abandoned John and ran off without hesitation. John watched Tony leave speechlessly, thinking the man was unreliable. A crowd had already gathered around him. "Hello, Homelander." A refined young man with a scientist's air extended his hand to John. "My name is Bruce Banner." Under John's somewhat strange gaze, Banner continued, "You might not recognize me, but I witnessed your battle with Abomination during the last Broadway fight. It was truly thrilling." "Hello, ex-husband," John muttered to himself, then flashed a smile that Banner found overly enthusiastic. "Of course I know you, level 3 hero, the Hulk. I've heard you get stronger the angrier you get. I think your actual performance is at least level 4. You know me." Banner was somewhat flattered, not expecting Homelander to have paid attention to him. He also felt Nick Fury's words seemed somewhat biased. Homelander was clearly a nice person. "But actually, my hero name is Hulk. It's just that netizens call me the Hulk because of my transformed appearance," Banner corrected. "I see, ex-husband," John muttered to himself, without uttering a word. "Hey, you over there, You must be the #1 ranked hero on the entire network right now, right? A woman dressed in a dark green bodysuit stood with her arms crossed, looking at him arrogantly. First, I'm not called Hey, you should call me Homelander. John slowly turned around and said, second, your attitude is a bit impolite, Hellfire. Chapter 74 Hellish Blizzard. Inside the party, as John turned around, he was confronted by a stunningly beautiful and mature woman with an enviable figure. She wore a deep green long dress that perfectly accentuated her elegant curves and feminine charm. She also had striking shoulder-length dark green hair, fair skin, and delicate features, which, combined with her haughty expression, easily aroused a strong desire to conquer. Beside the level 5 hero, Hellfire, Tony Stark was embarrassingly bound in mid-air by her telekinesis, winking and pleading for help at John. Just moments before, while trying to pick up some heroes at the party, he had obliviously spotted Hellfire drinking nearby, and before he could even exchange a few words, he was captured. Could you please release my friend? John looked at Hellfire, a slight hint of helplessness in his voice when he mentioned his friend. I never imagined that the strongest hero on Earth right now would be a brat who hasn't even reached adulthood yet. Fubuki crossed her arms over her chest, supporting her rather imposing figure, and walked straight up to John, her phoenix eyes looking at John's somewhat youthful face with a smile. John looked down at the woman in front of him, not understanding her thought process. Why was she suddenly acting like this, trying to provoke him for no reason? Was she some kind of little brat? But this guy was clearly not a little kid anymore. The standoff between the two immediately attracted the attention of everyone present. Even the usually ravenous Straw Hat pup stopped eating and looked over. Akame almost immediately came to the two of them and advised, hey, you two are both heroes, there's no need to be so tense. Fubuki, why don't you put Iron Man down first? What if I don't? Fubuki said in an extremely calm tone, but anyone could hear the hint of irritation in her voice. To be honest, she was very unhappy when she first arrived in this world. After all, she had been suddenly and inexplicably brought to this completely unfamiliar world, and all her previous relationships had completely disappeared. But soon, she witnessed the differences between this world and her original one. In terms of both abilities and technology, Earth in this world was far too weak, so weak that even a hero like her, whose strength was only around the top 5 of her original A rank, could dominate. However, unlike technology and abilities, Fubuki quickly realized what a locational advantage was. This place would continuously produce life forms and items from other worlds like herself, and some of their ability systems actually possessed considerable potential. This discovery immediately made Fubuki realize the precious value of this place. If she could become the strongest in this world at this stage, she could then use her strength to intimidate the entire world and conquer it. With this snowballing effect, she could definitely become stronger quickly, then find her way home step by step, and finally stand before the sister who had suppressed her entire life, and utterly humiliate her. And you, Homelander, you will be my first step in ruling this world, Fubuki murmured to herself, looking at the boy before her. As long as she defeated this person, she would become the strongest in the world. As for failure? That was out of the question. To deal with Homelander, she had reviewed all of his video footage and combat analysis. In terms of combat prowess, no one understood Homelander better than her. And she had absolute confidence in her own strength. Are you daydreaming? John said coldly. Having already offered his assistance, the other party dared to refuse. In John's view, this was utterly shameless. It seemed Hellfire didn't want to be his friend. And if not my friend, then my enemy. The next moment, John's right hand gently rose, and before everyone's eyes, it slowly reached towards the other's smooth, white neck. The opportunity has arrived. Seeing Homelander choose to attack first, Fubuki's lips curled into a smile, and she released a massive amount of nen. To deal with her opponent with all her might, she used almost all her strength this time, even withdrawing the nen that had distracted her from binding Stark. A terrifying power immediately enveloped a 3-meter radius around the two of them. At this moment, even a missile exploding at close range in the venue couldn't break through this wall of nen. Meanwhile, this left Akame, who had been trying to stop the two, helplessly watching their battle unfold. John's right hand, under hellish Fubuki's incredulous gaze, effortlessly broke through her nen defenses, reaching forward to touch her delicate skin. A crushing defeat. A complete and utterly powerless crushing defeat. Everyone watched in shock as John, upon making contact with Fubuki, mercilessly grabbed her by the neck and lifted her up. Despite both being level 5 ability users, the result was an undeniable crushing defeat. How is this possible? Fubuki was utterly astonished. Even while being choked, she desperately attacked Homelander with all her nen. But the nen capable of twisting a 100-meter-tall building into a pretzel only managed to slightly indent Homelander's skin. The reason for this was simply that John's skin, while possessing high strength, also had considerable toughness and elasticity. The effect on John was like someone poking his cheek with a finger. Seeing that his opponent, instead of begging for mercy, dared to resist after being captured, John impatiently added a bit of force, pinching Fubuki so hard that her eyes rolled back and she almost fainted. "We're all heroes, there's no need to fight. You're almost choking her to death," Red Flash advised from the side. John turned his gaze to Stark. "You caused this, what do you think?" "I think this is fine," Stark shrugged. "Oh." A hint of regret flashed in John's eyes. Although Fubuki's bratty behavior annoyed him, she was undeniably beautiful, and quite to John's liking. In this situation, if Stark chose not to give up, he could simply take advantage of the situation and use the guise of avenging Stark to subject the girl to what he called love-based discipline. "I'll find an opportunity next time. I'd really like to know what it feels like to have Fubuki use her telekinesis to give me a crescent slash." Thinking this, John then tossed Fubuki's body away like a ragdoll, sending her crashing into a nearby dining table. As the dining table broke completely, Fubuki rolled several times on the floor before finally stopping. Hiss. Everyone present gasped at John's actions, thinking it best not to provoke him unless absolutely necessary. After all, if he treated beautiful women like this, daring to mess with him was practically suicide. Author's note on the launch of Chapter 75. After more than a month, it's finally going to be available for purchase tomorrow, so you know what that means. First of all, I want to thank all the readers for their support, since the author relies entirely on readers for income. So, you readers are the real heroes. I also want to thank every reader who has made it this far for your recommendation votes and monthly tickets. Perhaps because the beginning was a bit lackluster, the book's performance is only average, it only made it to the third round of recommendations, which is quite a shame. As for the later plot, well, depression is definitely not going to happen, since the protagonist isn't the type to suffer losses easily. Any loss he suffers will be retaliated against tenfold by his enemies. In short, I hope everyone can continue to support me. Thank you so much. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.